Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about What If Deku Was Everyone's Crush Part 2. If you guys enjoy this What If and want to see Part 3, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content and leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story 𝗵𝗃𝗁 from Wattpad. So let's start the video. That Izuku not only has 2 girlfriends but also has a member which is over 7 inches long and stays hard even after releasing a load. He has the face of an innocent boy and yet has the 𝗧𝗧 drive of a beast. Forgetting his place as a student, he quickly snatched the phone from Higury's hand and continued staring at the damning message as he fearfully asked, "Does Nezu-sensei know about this?" Knowing him, he probably knew about it long before the message started to spread around the school, replied Higury, who did not mind Izuku snatching his phone in an understandable moment of panic. Izuku's shoulders slumped in comical despair as he muttered, "And no wonder everyone in school has been staring at me today." While the boys stared at him with amazement, envy, or even admiration, the girls stared at him as though he was a lustful beast to be avoided or a piece of meat to be devoured. He then fell onto all fours as he added, "And my mom's going to disown me and then kill me when she finds out about this. Or tease me to death, which might just be worse." Higury bent down to console Izuku, as well as retrieve his smartphone, and said, "If it makes you feel any better, the principal is doing what he can to keep the damage on your reputation as well as the reputations of your girlfriends to a minimum." He then grinned and said, "Besides, scoring 2 girls at the same time after what you all went through back at summer camp is hardly the worst SXL scandal the hero world has ever known." Izuku found the willpower to stand up and said, "I just hope that this mess will die down soon. Provided that you stay faithful to those 2 girls, I'm pretty sure that the worst of the rumors will die down before long," said Higury, who failed to notice Izuku's slight flinch at the statement. Considering the 𝗓𝗏 plan, Izuku had every reason to worry that his growing infamous reputation as a lustful beast would not die down anytime soon. "Anyway, I've already taken more of your time than necessary, so I'll let you take 𝗧𝗵𝗃 off my hands for a while," said Higury, who then whispered in a conspiratorial way, "By the way, if you don't mind me making a request, please help me to convince that idiot to stop blowing up the workshop. She has caused more explosions than all of her peers combined." "You're not seriously telling me to use my manly charms on her, are you?" asked Izuku, who noted the irony that Higury was essentially telling him to take in Mei as a HRM member after she already knew about the HRM plan. "Honestly, yes, I am," admitted Higury, who then explained, "Make no mistake, she's a great inventor, but I'll rest a lot easier if I know that she has someone to keep her from blowing stuff up all the bloody time." Izuku chuckled sheepishly and said, "Well, I can't make any promises, but I'll see what I can do. In return, do you think you can help with the rumors?" "That depends. Do you and your girlfriends love one another?" asked Higury. Izuku had a firm, confident, and downright heroic expression on his face as he answered, "We do, 𝗵𝗃𝗁-sensei." It may have taken the attack during summer camp and the Kamino incident for the 2 girls to finally decide to tell me their true feelings for me, but I am truly glad that we got our feelings across. Higury smiled at Izuku and patted him on the shoulder as he spoke, "Then I'll do what I can to convince everyone that those 2 girls have a damned good reason to be your girlfriends." "Thank you, 𝗵𝗃𝗁-sensei," said Izuku, who gratefully bowed to Higury. "Think nothing of it," said Higury, who then pushed Izuku towards Mei and said, "Now, go and find out how much progress 𝗧𝗵𝗃 has made with your support equipments." Mei was all too happy to show off the progress that she had made to Izuku as she quickly grabbed onto him and then dragged him to her corner of the workshop. He soon found out that Mei would be able to finish some of the requested support equipment by the end of the day and would personally deliver the goods to the girls' side of the Class 1A dorms. The boy could not help but blush as he knew that she would soon learn more about him and possibly decide to become an official member of his 𝗓𝗏. Meanwhile, Toru recently received a message from Mina to meet her in a secluded part of the school to discuss on how to settle things peacefully with Izuku, Ochako, and Tsuyu. Considering her role in spying on the 3 of them while they were sexually pleasuring one another, Toru knew better than to ignore such a discussion. She had barely avoided Tsuyu, who could not only camouflage herself but even detect infrared light, which essentially gave her heat-detecting abilities. Although Toru was undoubtedly invisible, she could do nothing about concealing her own body heat. The invisible girl shuddered as she recalled how Tsuyu kept on chasing after her like some sort of unseen persistent predator. It was a small miracle that she was able to escape Tsuyu's grasp. Before long, she saw Mina, who was waiting for her at the meeting place, and said, "Hey, Mina-chan. You wanted to discuss with me on how to settle things peacefully with those 3 lovebirds, right?" Mina nodded and explained, "The good news is that I have an idea on how to settle things peacefully." Toru tilted her invisible head and asked, "And the bad news?" Mina did not react to the downright terrifying sight of Tsuyu emerging from camouflaged hiding directly above Toru with her long tongue extended as she sheepishly smiled and replied, "Well, it involves getting an earful of slimy wing wong." "Wait, what?" asked Toru before Tsuyu suddenly seized her with her tongue, which was coated with a slimy copy of 𝗬𝗵𝗲. Elsewhere, Momo and Jirairu were making their way to class when Ochako stopped them and asked, " Jirairu-chan, Momo-chan, can I have a word with the both of you?" Surprised by Ochako's sudden request, both girls had no reason to reject it as Momo replied, "Of course, you can. Is something the matter, Uraraka-san?" Ochako smiled sheepishly as she scratched the back of her head and explained, "Well, it's not something to be discussed in public." Jirairu blushed as she wore a deadpan expression and asked, "It's nothing to do with your love life, does it? If it does, count me out." Embarrassed by Jirairu's response, Ochako waved her hands to dispel the implication and said, "And no, it's nothing to do with my love life. I just want to talk to you two about some things in private, that's all." Jirairu raised her eyebrows skeptically while Momo readily accepted Ochako's request. "Well, if is something not related to 𝗪𝗲, Momo coughed before she corrected herself. "Love, I suppose we can afford a few minutes to help you out." "Great," said Ochako, who then turned around and beckoned the 2 other girls to follow her. In spite of her doubts, Jirairu decided to tag along with Momo as they both followed Ochako to a secluded part of the school. Once they arrived at the place, which was an unoccupied science laboratory, Ochako closed the door and said, "Thanks coming to hear me out." "It's no trouble at all, Uraraka-san," said Momo, who then added, "As the vice representative of Class 1A, it's only natural for me help my fellow classmates in any way I can." Jirairu shrugged and said, "Your love life aside, you're still a friend of ours, so of course we'll help you out if you need it." Ochako smiled gratefully and said, "Thank you, it means a lot of me." "So, what do you need help with anyway?" asked Jirairu. At that moment, 2 blobs of pink slime landed onto Jirairu and Momo's heads. Later at the dorms, Izuku, who was helping Mei to deliver some support gear to the girls of Class 1A, blinked in surprise as he stared at all 6 of his female classmates who had gathered in Ochako's room and asked, "How did you 2 manage to get all the others on the same day?" "Well, after I convinced Mina-chan to join us, Mina-chan and Tsuyu-chan worked together to convince Toru-chan while I had a word with both Momo-chan and Jirairu-chan," explained Ochako. Jirairu wore an annoyed expression as she added, "Ochako-chan got us real good. We didn't even get to say no before we were convinced to give you and this crazy 𝗓𝗏 a chance." To be fair, I couldn't have done the double brain jack without completely evacuating from Ochako-chan and splitting that copy into 2. The only reason why I can even consider doing such a thing is because I trust her completely, said 𝗬𝗵𝗲, who was mentally communicating with everyone present in the room. Izuku knew that the girls were deliberately avoiding mentioning about 𝗬𝗵𝗲 to prevent anyone from finding out about the brain-jacking slime girl. He then recalled what 𝗬𝗵𝗲 had done to him, Ochako and Tsuyu earlier that day and mentally spoke to her, "𝗬𝗵𝗲-chan, I think you should stay hidden and not leave our heads too often. The last thing we need is you being discovered by someone whom we cannot fully trust." 𝗬𝗵𝗲's mental image nodded in understanding and said, "I understand, Izuku-kun. Still, I never expected you 3 to be forming a harem of all things," said Momo as she placed her hand onto her cheek in a ladle-like manner and then mentally added, "or the fact that your love lives were actually improved by a brain-jacking ex-villainess. No offense meant, Yamanaka-san." "None taken, Imo-chan," said 𝗬𝗵𝗲, who then mentally spoke to Izuku. "That said, we managed to find a lead on our objective." "Really? Who?" asked Izuku as he handed the support gear to the girls. "It's not really a who but rather a what," said 𝗬𝗵𝗲, who then explained, "It seems that 𝗬𝗲-chan's parents requested a trusted family doctor to implant a tracking device into her body so that they could get someone to track her down in case anything bad happens to her, such as getting kidnapped by a villain. Considering her invisibility quirk and the USJ attack, I can't really blame them for making that decision, and I can't imagine them knowingly doing anything that would harm her unless they are forced to do so." Izuku nodded slightly and mentally said, "I understand. There is a chance that this could be a false lead, but we do need to be sure about the tracking device is not being used by the League of Villains or any other villainous groups. Which is why Yu-chan quickly reported the matter to Nezu-sensei after I had brain-jacked 𝗬𝗲-chan," said 𝗬𝗵𝗲. "Hopefully, that will settle the issue. I'd rather not have to drag in any more people into this," said Izuku. "Kind of too late for that, don't you think?" asked 𝗬𝗵𝗲. Izuku smiled sheepishly and said, "Maybe, but in my defense this is mainly Nezu-sensei's idea. Speaking about harem plans, I think we should start discussing about this crazy idea of yours, Midoriya Izuku," said Mina, who had a cheeky grin on her face. "That's right, are you seriously going to form a harem?" asked 𝗳𝗪. Izuku blushed and bashfully replied, "Well, I'm already in a relationship with Ochako-chan and Tsuyu-chan, so none of you have to actually join the harem if you don't want to." He then mentally added, "You're in the harem too, by the way, 𝗬𝗵𝗲-chan." "I know, Izuku-in," replied 𝗬𝗵𝗲. Momo, 𝗳𝗪, Toru and Mina looked at one another for a moment and then turned their attention towards Izuku. Mina was the first to speak as she shrugged and replied, "Well, none of us has a boyfriend at the moment. Heck, I didn't even think about getting a boyfriend up until recently." "Really?" asked Izuku, who was surprised by the answer. "The other boys in our class are generally good friends and comrades, but let's just say that we have our reasons for not considering them, as well as you, as boyfriend material," explained Momo, who then added, "Prior to recent events, only Uraraka-san and Azui-san even considered you as a possible boyfriend, Midoriya-san." Izuku recalled Ochako and Tsuyu's conversation with the other girls of Class 1A and even 3 girls from Class 1B about boyfriends during summer camp. Blushing at the realization that he might be the only sexually attractive boy in the whole class, at least as far as Mina, Toru, Momo and 𝗳𝗪 were currently aware of, Izuku bashfully asked, "So you're okay with getting to know me? Considering that none of us have a boyfriend and your SXL acts have gotten us hot and bothered lately, I'd say that we have nothing to lose in getting to know you," said 𝗳𝗪. The other girls, including Mei, nodded in agreement with 𝗳𝗪. Seeing no reason to delay any further, Izuku sat down and said, "All right then, you might want to get comfortable. This could take a while." One memory share later, 𝐒𝐻 swore 𝗳𝗪 as tears fell from her eyes. Prior to the recent memory sharing, Mei, Mina, Toru, Momo and 𝗳𝗪 were not informed of certain details such as Izuku and 𝗬𝗵𝗲's full backstories and the details of One for All. Needless to say, all 5 of them were shocked by 𝗬𝗵𝗲's terrible past, which drove her to villainy, and Izuku's cruel abuse due to being quirkless. They also quickly understood why both Ochako and Tsuyu became so cold if not hostile towards Katsuki lately, and, honestly, none of them could blame the 2 girls. In fact, their opinion of Katsuki had fallen so much that he was deemed as basically no better than Mineta as far as they were concerned. Considering that Katsuki had spent years bullying Izuku for being quirkless and even went so far as to suicide bait him, the girls felt justified in thinking that he was no better than the worst pervert they had ever known. They knew that any hero worth his salt would not be a cruel bully who picked on the weak. Feeling mentally and emotionally drained, the girls were in no mood for anything other than rest, preferably with plenty of warm cuddles. Even Mei was affected by the urge, but she had something else which was even more urgent in mind as she stood up and spoke with uncharacteristic seriousness in her voice. "Everyone, please read the instructions on how to use the babies that I have made for all of you. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me tomorrow. I'll also let all of you know as soon as I'm done making the other babies." "Do you need to go somewhere, Hatsum-san?" asked Izuku. "Let's just say that I might need help in improving my babies," said Mei, who then added before she left, "Also, count me in as a harem member, Izuku." Although the others were not aware, 𝗬𝗵𝗲 knew what Mei actually wanted to do and mentally asked her, "You're going to ask Nezu-san to have her come here and possibly have her join the harem, aren't you?" Mei left Ochako's room as she mentally communicated with 𝗬𝗵𝗲. That's right. Izuku'll need all the help he can get if he's going to be the next heroic symbol of the world. We need her expertise, and we both know that Izuku's too pure-hearted to even consider such an idea on his own. Considering her relationship with All Might-san, it'll be best that he's informed about your idea too before Nezu tries to invite her. The last thing we need is an overprotective former hero going after our collective butts, said 𝗬𝗵𝗲, who did not want to even think about an angry All Might going after her and her hosts. Retired hero or not, 𝗬𝗵𝗲 did not want to risk getting United States of smashed into the next century. No argument there, agreed Mei. While Mei left the dorm, she caught sight of Katsuki and threw a dirty look at him before she left. Her angry look did not go unnoticed as Ijuru blinked at her and asked, "Hey, Bakugu, did you blow up one of her inventions or something?" Katsuki was, somewhat blissfully, unaware of how badly the girls of Class 1A and Mei viewed him as he angrily replied, "No, I didn't do 𝗧𝗍𝗧 to goggle stuff." Back to Izuku and the girls of Class 1A, "So I'm assuming that you all want to join the harem too?" asked Izuku. "Considering everything that you have revealed to us, I think it is safe to say that we're all interested to give this harem lifestyle a try if nothing else," admitted Momo. Much like the other girls, she was awed by Izuku's heroic nature in spite of his past suffering, and she knew that he would make a great hero. There was also the fact that Izuku was apparently incredible in 𝗧𝗧, which was an admittedly appealing bonus. Izuku blushed at the thought of being sexually ending with the other girls in his class as he asked, "Well, if you don't mind, I would like to have a word with Hagakure-san alone. Is that all right with all of you?" Realizing why Izuku wanted to have a word with Toru alone, none of the girls protested, although they were disappointed that Izuku would be spending time with her, especially Ochako and Tsuyu. Toru, on the other hand, was surprised that Izuku wanted to spend time with her alone, but she did not refuse as she led him to her room. Before long, Izuku was alone with Toru in her room and he asked her, "Are you all right, Hagakure-san?" "Well, considering everything that has happened today, I'm doing okay, I guess," replied Toru, who was lacking her usual upbeat attitude. Concern was evident on Izuku's face as he asked, "You're worried, aren't you?" Well aware that Izuku had seen her memories, Toru meekly nodded and said, "Considering that I might have played a role in bringing those villains to summer camp," Izuku gently yet firmly placed his hands onto her shoulders and said, "Listen to me. No matter what Nezu-sensei finds out about that tracking device, please know that this is not your fault. Your parents asked that doctor to put that tracking device into your body for the sake of being able to keep track of you in case anything bad happens to you. The only ones who deserve the blame are the villains who have taken advantage of it, and that's assuming that they have actually done it somehow." Tears welled up in Toru's eyes as she hugged herself and argued, "But if my tracking device was used by the villains to find us during the summer camp, that means that Ragdoll's loss of her quirk, Katsuki's kidnapping, and everyone's injuries were all because of it." Her tears fell as she started to sniffle. How can I face everyone and still be happy as though nothing is wrong after knowing that my parents and I have basically allowed the attack to happen? I don't even know how to start atoning for what I have allowed to happen." "Hagakure-san, please look at me," said Izuku. Toru hesitantly looked up into Izuku's eyes and saw only kindness and concern in them as Izuku continued to speak. "I was among the people who got badly hurt in the attack, but I refuse to blame you for something which you have unknowingly done. You're my classmate and a close friend of both Ochako-chan and Tsuyu-chan who also don't blame you for the attack." Toru became even more upset as she slammed her clenched fists into Izuku's chest while yelling at him, That's the thing, you selfless idiot." She shook with barely repressed emotions as she continued to yell, "Why your arms, that boy? Coulda, if things had gone even a little bit differently, both of you and so many others would have died. I shouldn't have become your classmate. I should have just accepted what everyone said about me being invisible and—" Toru's rant was cut short when Izuku suddenly hugged her closely and gently patted her head with his scarred hand. He then said, "Please, don't ever think that you're not worth anything." Thanks to the memory sharing, Izuku knew that Toru had a fear of living her life being unnoticed and alone due to her invisible nature. The prejudice which she received due to her quirk only made her hidden fears and insecurities worse. As someone who was deemed as worthless due to being quirkless, Izuku knew what it was like to be treated as though his very existence did not matter to anyone, and he refused to allow Toru to think way about herself. Unable to hold back her emotions, Toru cried. Sometime later, Hagakure-san, do you feel any better now? Asked Izuku, who was sitting on Toru's bed with the invisible girl by his side. His arm was draped around the girl's shoulders in a comforting manner. Toru nodded in spite of being invisible and said, "Thank you, Deku-kun. I really needed someone to cry on." Izuku smiled kindly to her and said, "It's the least I can do to help you, too. You can call me by my first name, Deku-kun," said Toru. Realizing that he had permission to call Toru by her first name, Izuku nodded and said, "I understand, Toru-chan." Toru's blush would have been clear for all to see if she was visible as she hesitantly replied, "Say Deku-kun. If I'm a part of your harem, does that mean we can have section?" Izuku blushed as he replied, "Well, we certainly could." His expression became serious as he added, "But do you really want to? I don't want you to have SEC with me just because you feel obligated to repay me for forgiving you or because you need something to stop the pain. Trust me on this, having SEC for just those reasons don't usually end well." 𝗬𝗵𝗲's mental image nodded in agreement with Izuku as she spoke. "He's right, you know. If you're going to have SEC with Izuku-kun, do it because you actually like him as a person, not because he's the easiest source of comfort to get." Smiling in spite of being invisible, Toru admitted, "I admit that I want to be comforted and I am grateful for your kindness and forgiveness, Deku-kun." She then reached out and kissed Izuku tenderly on the cheek before she added, "However, I also like you as a person and I know for a fact that you will treat me and the other girls in the harem right." Realizing that Toru was serious, Izuku's blush deepened and said, "If that is how you really feel about me, then I'll try to be as gentle as I can, Toru-chan." Toru nodded and then started to remove her clothes. Izuku quickly removed his own clothes and the both of them were soon naked. While Izuku was essentially staring at seemingly empty air, Toru was staring at his naked body with a mixture of awe for its masculine appeal and regret for the scars of his damaged arms. Izuku then asked, "So do you want me to be on top or do you want to be the one on top?" "I'll let me be the one on top," said Toru, who then added, "My naked body might be difficult to get used to." Izuku nodded and lay back on the bed. He soon felt someone getting on top of him and he asked, "Toru-chan, are we facing face to face?" "Yes, we are," replied Toru. "Then, please excuse me," said Izuku before he reached out to told her. As soon as he got hold of her face, which had soft cheeks, he started to gently trace his fingers on other parts of her upper body, including her short hair, shoulders, neck, ears, and melons. The invisible girl shivered in pleasure as he gently fondled her soft melons and teased her irked nipples. Her breath grew heavier and her nether part became moist as Izuku proceeded to slide her flat stomach, backside, and thighs. As for Izuku, he felt increasingly aroused as, in spite of being unable to see Toru, he could still touch, smell, and hear her. His growing arousal became apparent as his pee-pee became fully irked and started to twitch while 𝗓𝗔𝗪 leaked from the exposed tip of his glands. Unable to bear the growing longing in her loins any longer, Toru said, "Deku-kun, I'm going to put your big and stiff thingy in." Izuku nodded in understanding and almost gasped as he could feel a warm yet unseen hand guide his phallus towards what he assumed to be Toru's invisible maidenhood. Soon, he felt his member entering her sacred place and he knew that Toru was struggling as he could hear her holding back gasps of pain. He was about to ask her if she wanted him to be on top when she suddenly forced her hips downwards so that his pee-pee could enter her fully. Toru barely held back a scream of pain as she gripped onto the sheets of her bed tightly and gritted her teeth. As the pain slowly subsided, she started gasping and was struggling to support herself, so Izuku placed his hands below her armpits to hold her up. "Hey, are you all right, Toru-chan?" asked Izuku, who could see blood on his still visible phallus and was worried that he had caused her great harm. "I am okay, Deku-kun," said Toru, who then asked, "You do realize that your hands are under my armpits, right?" Izuku blushed and sheepishly replied, "I kind of suspected it, but I didn't think that was important at the time." Toru chuckled at Izuku's still innocent nature and said, "I'm all right now. You don't have to hold me up while I move, Deku-kun." "Maybe so, but I do want to continue holding you and touching you, Toru-chan," replied Izuku, who then added, I might not be able to see it, but I can tell by touch alone that you are appealing. He was being honest, as he could feel her soft yet firm body, smooth skin, and delicate bone structure. 𝗬𝗪 felt her heart swell with joy, as she had longed to hear someone compliment her looks in spite of being invisible. She then lowered herself so that she could kiss Izuku on the lips. Although Izuku was initially surprised, he soon gladly accepted her kiss as he placed his hand behind her head so that he could kiss her more deeply. After what seemed to be a mere moment, the two of them parted their lips to breathe and looked at one another longingly before 𝗬𝗪 started to move her hips. In spite of the pain, 𝗬𝗪 also felt pleasure as she could feel Izuku's member reaching deep inside of her. As 𝗬𝗪 moved with increasing speed and passion, Izuku started to move his own hips to match with her movement while his hands held onto her slim waist. 𝗬𝗪's sweat formed a rough yet artsy outline of her essential body as she started to sway her hips to fully enjoy the feeling of Izuku's member moving about in her nether part. Soon, the two lovers were close to 𝗧𝗵𝗲 and Izuku said, 𝗬𝗪-chan, I'm going to come soon. I had my PRD yesterday, so go ahead and do it, said 𝗬𝗪, who knew enough about the female reproductive cycle to know that that day was her save day. The movement of her hips quickly accelerated as she too was close to 𝗧𝗵𝗲. Reassured by her statement, Izuku climaxed and ejaculated deep inside of the invisible girl, who could feel his hot seed filling her insides. As Izuku recovered from his orgasm, he idly noted that he could see his 𝐔𝐬𝐽 filling up the inside of 𝗬𝗪's twitching vagina and even leaking into her WMB. The sight turned him on, and his still stiff member twitched in response to his SXL longing. Surprised by the twitching sensation, 𝗬𝗪 had to ask, so how many times do you have to come for your thingy to calm down? Izuku blushed and avoided 𝗬𝗪's invisible yet undeniably inquisitive gaze as he replied, I honestly don't know, but I think I can come at least 3 more times. 𝗬𝗪 blinked and said, I hate to break it to you, but I just came and don't think my girly bits can take much more of it today. Knowing that 𝗬𝗪 had just lost her virginity, Izuku was about to reassure her, then they both heard the door open. Both lovers were shocked as Ochako, Tsuyu, Mina, Jairu, and Momo entered the room with bright red blushes on their faces. Their blushes only grew when they could see Izuku's phallus, which was still inside 𝗬𝗪's 𝗔𝗪𝗧𝗔-filled vagina. Izuku was filled with both fear and excitement as he asked the 5 other girls, do you want to have ZC too? All 5 girls nodded, and Jairu glared at Izuku as she spoke, you are so taking responsibility for making us so dim and thirsty for section. Not that I mind having you girls take over, but my bed's not big enough to fit everyone, said 𝗬𝗪. Mina grinned in an almost predatory way as she replied, nothing that a few adjustments can't fix. As if sharing one mind, Mina, Ochako, and Jairu went to fetch Jairu's mattress, pillow, and blanket, while Momo went to Tsuyu's room to get some spare IUDs. Unlike 𝗬𝗪, Momo wanted to make sure that everyone who wished to have SEC with Izuku were properly protected. Seeing the girls set off, Izuku sighed with a smile and his face while 𝗬𝗪 pulled herself off his irked phallus. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 used that moment to leave 𝗬𝗪's head and oozed her way into her sore private part to feed on Izuku's 𝗔𝗪𝗧𝗔. Safe day or not, it never hurt to make sure that an unwanted PRGNCY would not happen. Dekun. Yes, 𝗬𝗪-chan. 𝗬𝗪 leaned against Izuku's solidly muscled form and said, thank you for being a good friend and lover. Izuku smiled in response and nuzzled against her head affectionately as he replied, you're welcome, 𝗬𝗪-chan. Although the two lovers knew that the peaceful silence would soon end due to the other members of Izuku's growing harem wanting a piece of the action, they did not mind it the least, as they simply enjoyed being close with one another. Meanwhile, I must admit, I never expected you to make such a request, Hatsum-san, said Nezu, who was smiling at Mei, who stood before him in his office. He then asked her, so tell me, why should I invite Melissa Shield into a high school when she can receive better technological support and security from my island? Mei had a determined look on her face as she spoke. That's because she's the only one who actually created something that could protect Izuku's arms from getting damaged by his own quirk, which, by the way, we both know he was not born with. She stepped forward as she added, even if the full gauntlet was destroyed in the end, the fact that it could protect Izuku from damaging his own arm while he used the full power of his quirk for up to 3 times is more than enough reason for any sane individual to realize that she's a bloody genius. Mei stood across Nedzu's desk and slammed her hands onto it as she spoke. As much as it pains me to admit it as an inventor, I need her help to make the kind of support gear that Izuku will need to have until his body is able to handle that ridiculously powerful quirk without destroying his own body in the process. Her eyes bore into Nedzu's own eyes as she asked, "So, can you do anything to help us?" A tense moment of silence passed before Nedzu smiled and accommodatingly replied, "I would need to have a word with All Might about the idea of having Melissa join the 𝐻𝐻𝐾. However, given your convincing argument and certain complications that have arisen due to her father's misguided actions during this year's Expo, I believe I will be able to bring her to you. High school as a transfer student of the support department. I will let you know by tomorrow, Hatsum-san." Mei smiled and replied, "Thank you, Nedzu-sensei. You won't regret it. Just be sure to let Izuku and the rest of his harem know about Melissa's arrival after I have confirmed her transfer," said Nedzu. "Will do, Nedzu-sensei," said Mei before she left the office to return to her room. After Mei left, Nedzu could not help but chuckle as he thought, what an interesting turn of events. To think that the infamous mad inventor and shameless advertiser of the support department would actually go so far for the sake of helping Midoriya after joining his harem. "I seems that I have actually underestimated your ability to impress the ladies, Midoriya Izuku. Even I'm no longer certain of what will happen if you continue to make your harem grow." His chuckles turned into a near-mad cackle of glee as he added, "Things are about to get interesting." Boku no Hero Academia. Izuku's harem Academia disclaimer. This is amateur-rated fanfiction story of Boku no Hero Academia that I am writing for RDC Fun. Needless to say, this story is AU. The characters may seem OOC to some and there will be smutty lemons. Also, I own nothing of the series other than the fanfiction stories that I make. Chapter 4, Girls of Class 1A. A short while ago, the other girls of Class 1A decided to have SEC with Izuku after he had made love with Toru. In preparation for the org, the girls brought a mattress, a blanket and a pillow from Jiru's room and placed them onto the floor next to Toru's bed. They also brought spare IUDs from Tsuyu's room and had already inserted them into their wombs with the help of 𝗬𝗵𝗲's slimy copies. Toru also had an IUD inserted into her after she had had SEC with Izuku. Currently, Izuku was sitting on Toru's bed and he was blushing as he tried to look away from the 5 naked girls who stood before him. Toru, who already had SEC with Izuku and was still sore from the admittedly wonderful experience, had just put on some clothes so that she could be seen to prevent anyone from bumping into or stepping onto her by accident. She was resting on a corner of her bed, although Izuku had the feeling that she would be keeping her eyes peeled to watch him have SEC with the other 5 girls. Mina was grinning broadly as she asked, "So, Midori, who are you going to have SEC with first?" Izuku's blush grew as he asked, "Ochako-chan, Tsuyu-chan, do you two want to go first?" Both girls nodded and quickly approached him before anyone else had the chance to butt in. Ochako reached out and kissed Izuku passionately while she rubbed her moist private part onto the tip of his erect phallus in preparation for PNDRTIN. As for Tsuyu, she moved behind Izuku and suddenly used her elongated tongue to penetrate Ochako's nether part before Izuku's pee-pee could enter it. Ochako stopped kissing Izuku and gasped in surprise at the sudden intrusion. She soon felt pleasure as she gazed at Tsuyu and no fair, Tsuyu-chan. "Sorry, I couldn't resist, Karo," said Tsuyu, who enjoyed seeing Ochako's cute yet artsy reactions to her tongue wiggling and coiling about in her vagina. The other 4 girls of Class 1A could not help but stare and be aroused by the sight. In spite of wanting to have SEC with Izuku, Ochako could not help but enjoy the pleasure she was receiving from Tsuyu's tongue. Her pleasure only increased when Izuku reached out to lovingly grope and fondle her buttocks. Wanting to feel more, Ochako hugged Izuku and buried his face into her chest. Knowing what to do, Izuku used his mouth and tongue to tease her nipples while his hands started to playfully pat and slide her backside. Izuku almost gasped when Tsuyu stated to not only pleasure his pee-pee with her surprisingly dexterous feet, but even teased his nipples with her fingers. The pleasure was soon too much and 𝗧𝗵𝗲 slowed down, 𝗧𝗏-chan. I'm going to come too fast at this rate. And me too, said 𝗀𝗏𝗄. Us whatever, thought 𝗔𝗪 as she fingered herself while using her earjacks as makeshift vibrators on her 𝐒𝐻𝐢𝐽. She then noticed that Momo was fingering herself as well and, in a moment of lust-driven brazenness, shoved one of her earjacks into Momo's nether part and made his vibrate. Momo's gasped in shock and became weak in the knees, but she soon accepted the new sensation. She then created a pair of smooth metallic rods with rounded tips and gave one to 𝗔𝗪. Realizing that each narrow rod had a socket which she could plug her earjack into, and knowing exactly what to do with the rods, 𝗔𝗪 wasted no time in shoving her rod into her 𝗔𝗨 while Momo did the same. 𝗔𝗪 then plugged each earjack into a socket and made the rods vibrate. The effect was instantaneous as the rods vibrated vigorously, which caused both 𝗔𝗪 and Momo fall onto their knees in near orgasmic pleasure. Thankfully for their knees, they were both on the mattress that they had placed onto the floor earlier. Holy CRP. This feels too good, thought 𝗔𝗪, who then wondered, I wonder how good Midori's PP is going to feel. Mina was using her weakest acid, which was no stronger than orange juice, as viscous lubricant as she fingered herself and thought, in it, I want to have 𝐸 so badly. While 𝗔𝗪 and Momo discovered a new form of pleasure and soon started to make out with each other, Tsuyu quickly removed her tongue from 𝗀𝗏𝗄's womanhood, then wrapped it around her waist. 𝗀𝗏𝗄 was about to ask what Tsuyu was about to do when the tongue suddenly pulled her downward onto Izuku's stiff 𝗏𝗏𝗏. Stars seemingly appeared before her eyes as she felt his hot phallus enter her 𝗔𝗨 and reach the entrance into her WMB. Already aroused and close to 𝐒𝐭𝐴𝐽𝐻, both Izuku and 𝗀𝗏𝗄 wasted no time to reach orgasm as they moved at a frantic pace. Tsuyu continued to tease Izuku's nipples with her fingers while her tongue quickly switched its target to 𝗀𝗏𝗄's melons. Izuku noticed the tongue coiling around 𝗀𝗏𝗄's melons and started to lick, kiss, and nibble it. Tsuyu croaked in surprise, but she quickly accepted Izuku's show of affection as she used the tip of her tongue to tease one of 𝗀𝗏𝗄's nipples. Unable to bear the pleasure any longer, both Izuku and 𝗀𝗏𝗄 climaxed at the same time. The brown-haired girl actually screamed in pleasure as she wrapped her arms tightly around Izuku while his hot seed filled her 𝗔𝗨. Her whole body shook from the intense orgasm and she clearly needed time to recover. Izuku recovered more quickly than 𝗀𝗏𝗄 and kissed her tenderly in a genuine show of affection. 𝗀𝗏𝗄 happily accepted his kiss and allowed him to lift her off his still stiff member before he placed her next to Toru. He then fetched her mittens from her pile of clothes so that she would not accidentally make anything float while she slept. He also made sure not to interrupt 𝗔𝗪 and Momo, who were clearly making out with each other without a care in the world. While Izuku fetched 𝗀𝗏𝗄's mittens, his white seed spilled out of her still twitching nether part and Toru had the sudden idea of lapping it out of her. Having no reason to do otherwise, Toru lowered her invisible face into 𝗀𝗏𝗄's womanhood and spread it open to lick it. 𝗀𝗏𝗄's eyes were as wide as dinner plates as she stuttered, What are you doing, Toru-chan? She got her answer soon enough when Toru stuck her tongue into her opened vaginal opening to lick up Izuku's 𝗬𝗏𝗏𝗏. As she had just orgasmed, she was incredibly sensitive and was reduced to warm putty as she futilely tried to push Toru away from her tender loins. In spite of her shame, 𝗀𝗏𝗄 could not help but enjoy the feeling and idly wondered if Izuku could see into her 𝗬𝗏𝗏𝗏stained 𝗔𝗨. Izuku, who could clearly see 𝗀𝗏𝗄's opened private part through Toru's invisible head, was turned on by the sight and would have kept staring had Tsuyu not suddenly seized his PP with her long tongue and said, Izu-chan, it's rude to keep a lady waiting, Kero. Sorry about that, Tsuyu-chan, said Izuku. Well, I can't really blame you for being distracted. It does look really arty, Kero, admitted Tsuyu. She then turned her attention towards Momo and 𝗔𝗪 and thought, 𝗔𝗪's earjacks are a lot kinkier than I expected, Kero. Tearing his eyes away from the sight of Toru licking 𝗀𝗏𝗄, Izuku asked, So, you want me to hump you like an animal like last time? Tsuyu lay on her back and spread her womanhood open as she spoke, I want to face you as you press me down and mate me like a beast in heat. Deciding to entrust the mittens to Toru, Izuku quickly proceeded to mate with Tsuyu like a lust-driven beast. As he rutted her, he started to SCK on one of her nipples as though he was trying to get milk out of her BRST. Tsuyu loved the sensation and wrapped her arms around his head to keep his head in place while her hips moved to match his movements. "Wow, he's actually F her like an animal," said Mina, who then realized that Jirou and Momo were too into their own little world to even notice. The two girls were passionately kissing one another while Jirou fondled Momo's melons and Momo groped Jirou's backside. The two rods which were inside of them were still vibrating vigorously, which gave them waves of pleasure. Those two are really into each other, thought Mina, who then remembered something and mentally asked, 𝗧𝗵𝗲, mind if you come out and give my girly bit some loving? Sorry, too busy feeling everything at the same time, replied 𝗧𝗵𝗲. Mina's eyes widened in shock as she mentally asked, wait, seriously? Yup, replied 𝗧𝗵𝗲, who then started to blissful joy. Mina was silent for a moment before she thought, I so need Midori's PP in me before I go crazy. Thankfully for Mina, both Midoriya and Tsuyu soon achieved orgasm while Izuku was sucking and licking the tip of Tsuyu's tongue. Eager to finally receive some tender loving, and knowing that Momo and Jirou would not care about the wait, Mina rushed towards Izuku and said, Midori, if you don't screw me next, I'm going to melt your entire All Might collection. Izuku gulped in fear of both Mina's starved look and her terrifying threat. After all, some of the items in his collection were limited editions meant to be treasured till the end of time itself. Sure, let me put Tsuyu somewhere comfortable, replied Midoriya before he placed Tsuyu onto the mattress on the floor and covered her with a blanket to keep her warm. He then turned his attention towards Jirou and Momo and said, sorry, can you two please wait for a bit? I don't want Shido-san to do anything to my collection. Izuku's voice seemed to have snapped both Jirou and Momo from their blissful trance-like state, and both girls blushed as they realized that they had been basically making out with each other in front of Izuku and the other girls. Jirou did not dare to look at anyone in the eye as she replied, sure thing. Momo was equally embarrassed as she placed her hands onto her cheeks and thought, I can't believe that I actually kissed and touched another girl, in front of all of them no less. Speaking of girls making out, Ochako passed out after experiencing her second orgasm. Toru on the other hand was ready to attack Tsuyu's seed-filled vagina after she put Ochako's mittens onto her hands. Toru-chan, if you're going to lick me down there, you better be ready to get some licking yourself, said Tsuyu. Although surprised by Tsuyu's response, Toru smiled and replied, I'd like to see you try, Tsuyu-chan. Izuku tried his best to ignore the fact that Tsuyu and Toru were going to start licking each other's lady bits. As he turned his attention towards Mina, said, Lie down, Midori. I'm taking the lead. Knowing better than to argue with the pink-skinned girl, Izuku obediently lay down on one side of the bed and Mina quickly got onto him. She smirked at him as she spoke, I hope you have plenty of juice left because I'm going to squeeze you dry with everything I've got. Without further delay, Mina slammed her hips down onto Izuku's member, shoving the whole thing into her eager maidenhood. Due to being a dancer as well as a pro hero in training, Mina did not have much of her him left, and whatever pain she felt was drowned out by the pleasure she felt in having Izuku's phallus inside of her. She then moved her hips with the well-practiced vigor and precision of a dancer. She had a blissfully ecstatic look on her face as she could feel Izuku's pee-pee moving about inside of her vagina as she swayed and moved her hips with lustful passion and tenacity. Oh god, yes. This feels so good, yelled Mina. Considering that her SXL lust had been nearly unbearable, it was understandable why Mina was so happy to finally have Izuku's big PPU for herself. Although he felt great pleasure, Izuku was not content to simply lay still and thus started to use his hands to fondle Mina's melons. Mina happily accepted it and used her quirk to create lubricant to make her melons feel even better. Izuku then trailed his lubricant-covered hands over her side and onto her firm and shapely buttocks to fondle them. Mina in pleasure as Izuku started to move his hips to match with her movements. Mina-chan's going to SCK his soul out of him at this rate, swore Jirou, who decided to just watch Izuku and Mina having section. Well, Mina-chan's always been into romance, Karo, said Tsuyu, who was breathing heavily due to being pleasured by Toru, who tried to lick every drop of Izuku's 𝐔𝐬𝐽 from her nether part. As for Toru, the invisible girl passed out after her second orgasm, which was caused by Tsuyu's long and dexterous tongue that coiled and wriggled in her vagina like some sort of perverted tentacle. Momo did not say a word but instead watched as Mina and Izuku continued to have passionate section. Mina soon climaxed after Izuku started to lick and 𝗧𝗧𝗍 on one of her nipples which, due to her quirk, had the taste of lime. Izuku climaxed as well, filling her pink nether part with his fourth dose of white 𝗔𝗪𝗁 which was somehow still thick and plentiful. Finally satisfied, Mina's quivering body collapsed onto Izuku. As she was catching her breath, Izuku hugged her gently and looked into her eyes before he gave her a kiss. In spite of her exhaustion, Mina happily accepted the kiss and though, "I'm so glad I that agreed to join his harem." Eventually, Izuku had to put Mina aside and decided to place her next to Ochako, who instinctively hugged her to slide her fluffy hair which felt similar to Izuku's own hair. Both Momo and 𝐲𝗪 noted that his PP was no longer irked but had to admit that his ability to 𝗔𝗪𝗧𝗔 4 times in quick succession was already an impressive feat by itself. Nevertheless, 𝗲𝗪 had to ask, "Say, Midori, you need to take a break. Yamamoto and I can wait until you've recovered before we have our turns." Izuku smiled bashfully and replied, "What, I could certainly use a drink." Momo nodded and offered, "While going into the common kitchen might be unwise, given our current states, I do have some tea in a thermos flask in my room if you're interested." "Thanks, I really appreciate, Yaoyorozu-san," replied Izuku. Momo could not help but smile as she replied, "You're welcome, Izuku. Also, there's no need to be so formal towards me. You can call me by my first name." 𝗲𝗪 raised her hand and said, "Same here, Midori." Izuku gave them a genuine smile as he replied, "I'll keep that in mind, Momo-chan, 𝗲𝗪-chan." Izuku's sincere response made both girls blush as 𝗲𝗪 thought, "How the hell can he still be so pure even after having SEC with 4 different girls?" "It's one of the great mysteries of the universe," said a post-orgasmic 𝗬𝗵𝗲 who could only agree with 𝗲𝗪. Anyway, I'll go and quickly fetch the thermos flask," said Momo. "You might want to put on some clothes first, Yamamoto," said 𝗲𝗪. Realizing that she was about to leave Toru's room naked, Momo blushed and thanked 𝗲𝗪 before she hastily put on her clothes and then left the room. After Momo left the room, 𝗲𝗪 turned her attention towards Izuku, who had taken a seat on an unoccupied spot of Toru's bed, and asked, "So, what's your opinion about the 4 girls whom you had SEC with so far?" Izuku blushed as he replied, "Well, they're all wonderful in their own way, so I can't really say who's the best when it comes go section." 𝗲𝗪 smirked at Izuku's bashfulness and said, "So what are their good points then?" In spite of himself, Izuku thought of the different good points of each girl, which 𝗬𝗵𝗲 cheekily decided to helpfully broadcast to the girls of the harem, including Mei, who was not present in Toru's room. Ochako-chan's really cute and cuddly in a way that makes you want to hug and cuddle with her while covered in a warm blanket on a cold night. She's also cheerful, warm and kind with an admirably competitive longing to achieve her goals. Tsuyu-chan on the other hand has a very nice lower body, especially the legs and butt, smooth moist skin and a really useful tongue. She's also very honest and calm about most situations, which makes her really reliable as both a fellow hero and a friend if not lover. Toru-chan's body may be invisible, but anyone who touches her will know that she is undoubtedly appealing her with smooth skin, soft yet firm body and delicate bone structure. She also tries her best to be optimistic in spite of her painful past due to her cruel peers, which is more than what I can say for my past self admittedly, and she's already proven herself to be a good friend if not more. Mina-chan's body is undoubtedly essential and well-toned, which is a given since she is both a hero in training and a skilled dancer. She's also energetic, romantic, and is willing to stand up to not only bullies but even villains in spite of being scared. I can't say much about 𝗧𝗵𝗲 since I haven't gotten NTMT with her, but I can already tell that she's appealing too. She may be pushy and offsetting, but she's really smart, dedicated to her passion, and isn't scared of trying again no matter how many times she fails in the process. Momo-chan's definitely appealing and, if I'm being honest, secretary. She's also a natural as a leader who is smart, dedicated, and eager to help others. Contrary to what Mineta would say, 𝗲𝗪-chan's not lacking in womanly charms. Granted, she's on the petite and slender side, but there's honestly nothing wrong with that and stop. Just stop thinking for a minute, you brainy doofus, yelled 𝗓𝗪, who was blushing furiously as the information she had just received. She had assumed that she was the least appealing of the girls in Izuku's harem, and yet it was clear that he did not think that way about her at all. 𝗓𝗪 was not the only one who was blushing, as every other girl in the harem, including Mei, blushed at the information they had just received. Even Ochako, Mina, and Toru woke up in response to Izuku's broadcast thoughts. Sorry about that. I tend to overthink stuff, said Izuku. Apparently, said 𝗓𝗪, who had a deadpan expression on her face. She then averted her eyes from Izuku's face as she twirled one of her ear jacks and asked, "So you think there's nothing wrong with me being petite and slender, right?" Izuku nodded and replied, "You may not have the kind of figure the other girls have, but you're no less appealing because of it." "Then I want you to F me like you mean it right now," said 𝗓𝗪 as she looked into her eyes. Realizing that 𝗓𝗪 was serious, and having rested enough to recover some of his stamina, Izuku nodded and approached her. In spite of her previous assertiveness, 𝗓𝗪 felt nervous, as she not only feared if her body could handle Izuku but also the possibility of being a disappointing SXL partner. Sensing her nervousness, Izuku did not immediately have 𝐸 with her. Instead, he gently reached out to her so that he could gently slide and massaged her upper body. 𝗓𝗪 shivered in pleasure as Izuku touched her body. Her pleasure grew as he started to fondle her small melons and gently teased her nipples. His hands then went downwards and soon started to pleasure her already moist 𝐶𝐻. Although she had stimulated her own 𝐶𝐻 before, she was not used to having it being stimulated by another person, and not even Momo touched it. As such, 𝗓𝗪 did not expect the strong jolt of sensation and in response. Suddenly aware of the fact that she had in fact loudly, 𝐴 clamped her hands onto her mouth and stared at Izuku, who was also staring at her. She also noticed that his flaccid member had become irked, as if it was aroused awake by something. Izuku swallowed his spit before he started to stimulate 𝗓𝗪's 𝐒𝐻 again. Powerful waves of pleasure hit 𝗓𝗪 as she tried her best to stop herself from In spite of her growing shame, 𝗓𝗪 could not help but accept the fact that Izuku was making her feel good, and her pleasure only grew when Izuku inserted her fingers into her maidenhood. Unable to resist, 𝗓𝗪 let go of her own mouth and started The girls in Toru's room blushed as they heard 𝗓𝗪's essential moans, which were downright 𝗓𝗓𝐺 to listen to. 𝗓𝗪's moans became even more sexually essential when Izuku, who decided to take a leaf from both Toru and Tsuyu's books, reached forward to lick her nether parts and even stick his tongue into it to stimulate her further. Stop. Why, you're going to make me come at this rate," cried 𝗓𝗪. Izuku stopped pleasuring her with his mouth as requested and quickly shifted his body so that his irked phallus was pressing against 𝗓𝗪's private part. Realizing what was to come, 𝗓𝗪 could not help but be a little afraid as she tearfully spoke, Please be gentle with me." Izuku nodded with an understanding smile and said, "I'll be as gentle as I can." He then penetrated 𝗓𝗪's maidenhood as gently as he could. However, given her petite frame and his generously endowed genitalia, 𝗓𝗪 felt pain and discomfort as it entered her, even though she had already inserted what was essentially a vibrating metal DLD into her vagina. In spite of the pain, 𝗓𝗪 was determined to bear it until Izuku's irked PP was fully inside of her. After what seemed to be an eternity, his PP was fully inside of her and was touching her CRVX. 𝗓𝗪 breathed through clenched teeth. She waited for the pain to subside. So tight. Though Izuku, as not even Ochako or Toru's version maidenhoods were as tight as 𝗓𝗪's. Eventually, the pain subsided and 𝗓𝗪 said, "You can move now, Midori. Just don't go too fast, Izuku nodded with a smile and said, "I won't, 𝗓𝗪-chan." He then started to move at a slow and gentle pace. Although 𝗓𝗪 still felt discomfort and pain, she also felt pleasure and comfort as Izuku's PP filled her to the brim. His strong yet gentle hands held her body tenderly and he affectionately kissed her while nuzzling against her neck and shoulder. Before long, her grunts and gasps of pain were replaced by moans and gasps of pleasure as her body and heart started to fully accept Izuku. Her RDC voice filled the room as she all but begged Izuku for the blissful release of orgasm. Turned on by her voice and close to 𝗧𝗵𝗲, Izuku increased his pace, which caused 𝐎𝐬𝐢𝐫 to hum even more loudly. When both Izuku and 𝐎𝐬𝐢𝐫 finally climaxed, 𝐎𝐬𝐢 screamed in blissful joy. When the two lovers finally calmed down, Izuku pulled himself away from 𝐎𝐬𝐢𝐫, who slumped onto the mattress. Blood and 𝗧𝗵𝗲 spilled out of her nether part, and Izuku felt bad for her as he knew she was going to be really sore in the following morning. He then gently picked her up and placed her next onto the bed with Mina and Ochako, who were already awake. "Wow, I never knew that 𝐎𝐬𝐢𝐫-chan had such a sexy voice," said Ochako. "Yeah, listening to her has gotten me aroused all over again," agreed Mina. "Not that I'm against each of us having a second round with Izuku-chan. We should let Momo-chan have her turn, Kero," said Tsuyu, who was pointing at Momo, who had already returned with the thermos flask. "I'm still a little sore and Tsuyu-chan's tongue has not lessened it at all," said Toru, who seemed sheepish about her sore state. "So, Izuku, are you still able to keep going?" asked Momo as she approached Izuku. She came back just in time to see Izuku having sex with 𝐎𝐬𝐢𝐫, and 𝐎𝐬𝐢𝐫's RDC voice was like music to her ears. "I'm probably going to need a bit of time to recover," admitted Izuku. "In that case, please have a drink and relax for a bit." "I can wait until you're ready," said Momo, who offered Izuku the thermos flask. "You sure? I wouldn't want to leave you frustrated," said Izuku. "Neither of us will be able to fully enjoy the experience if I were to force you to have 𝗧𝗟𝗘 with me. Better to have you rested and ready than to have you exhausted from pleasing so many girls in such a short time," replied Momo. Understanding Momo's logic, Izuku gratefully accepted the offered drink and took his time to enjoy the drink, which was high-grade black tea, and regain his stamina. In spite of her 𝗧𝗟𝗘 desires, Momo seemed perfectly composed as she took off her own clothes and sat next to Izuku like a dignified lady in waiting. However, an observant eye would realize that Momo's eyes and hands had a tendency to wander as she took in the sight of Izuku's naked body, which was glistering with sweat, and her hands inched ever closer towards their goal of touching him. Mina and Toru could not help but smirk knowingly, as they knew that Momo was eager for with Izuku and was simply bidding her time for the correct moment to make her move. After Izuku drank the tea, Momo made her move and sat onto his lap. Izuku blushed at Momo's bold move and asked, "I guess wait time is over." Momo chuckled in amusement and replied, "You could put it that way." She then stroked Izuku's body and said, "Honestly, I'm a little relieved that I'm the last one among the girls of Class 1A to be deflowered by you." Surprised by Momo's unexpected statement, Izuku asked, "Really? Why do you say so?" Momo frowned as she explained, "For as long as I can remember, I've had to put up with many boys and men who only see me as an object of longing in some form or another. I have also always thought that men who longing harems only see women as mere objects of 𝗧𝗟𝗘 pleasure." Her expression then softened into a smile as she added, "However, you never once saw any of us in that callous way. In fact, you actually saw me as someone admirable and strong person, even as I was wrestling with my loss of confidence due to my defeat by Tokoyami-san during the sports festival. Not to say that you're wrong, but it was Todoroki-kun who helped you get your confidence back, didn't he?" asked Izuku. Momo nodded and answered, "That is certainly true, but I get the feeling that Todoroki-kun wouldn't have been so kind and helpful towards me if he was still clinging on to his admittedly understandable hatred towards the fire aspect of his own quirk. In helping him, you have ended up helping me as well, Izuku." Izuku's blush deepened in response, and he looked away bashfully as he replied, "I am not all that great, really. Considering how you have already managed to sexually please 5 different girls within a single night, I beg to differ," said 𝗧𝗵𝗲, who mentally spoke to everyone in Toru's room. All the other girls who had heard 𝗧𝗵𝗲's statement nodded in agreement with her. Deciding that enough words had been spoken, Momo shifted so that she was straddling on top of Izuku's lap. She then smiled at him and said, "I want you to make me yours, Izuku." As Izuku had rested and rehydrated, he was ready to have one more round of a C, and his pee-pee became irked and poked at Momo's nether part in response to his 𝗧𝗟𝗘 arousal. Momo smiled and admitted, "To be perfectly honest, I was never truly exposed to anything 𝗧𝗟𝗘 before I overheard you having sex with Ochako-chan and Tsuyu-chan. I've been thinking about having sex with a real lover ever since, and I'm happy that you're willing to have me as your lover." "Momo-chan, "I'm also happy that you think that I'm someone worthwhile to accept as a lover," replied Izuku. No more words were necessary as Momo lowered herself onto Izuku's erect phallus while pressing her large melons against his muscular chest. Due to her past endeavors to relieve her lust, Momo's hymn was not as intact as it was before. However, she still felt pain as Izuku's erkt entered her vagina. Unlike 𝐲𝐬, Momo's experience was less painful and Izuku's PP was soon fully inside of her. In spite of her own pain and discomfort, Momo smiled at Izuku and started moving her hips. She bit her lower lip as waves of pleasure washed over her discomfort and Izuku's reactions to her body's movements turned her on. "God, I might get addicted to this," thought Momo as Izuku started to fondle her buttocks while he buried his face between her large melons. Momo-chan's pretty talented for someone who's supposed to be a sheltered rich girl who didn't even know much about SEC up until recently, Kero, said Tsuyu. She knew that Momo used to be an innocent and sheltered girl when it came to SXL activities, but she did not expect her interest in SEC to grow as much as it apparently had. "Something tells me that she might end up being the most perverted one among us," said Mina. "Should we be worried that we might witnessing the 𝐵𝗃𝗧𝗏 of midnight too?" "Zero," asked Toru. "That would depend if she will end up hurting Deku as a result," said Ochako. "Oh, are you telling me that you're fine with Momo becoming Midori's personal midnight sensei?" asked Mina, who had a cheeky grin on her face. Ochako blushed and argued, "And not really. I just don't want her to end up hurting Deku's feelings by going after other guys behind his back." "You do realize that it's rude to talk behind someone's back, yes?" asked Momo, who was slowing down her SXL pace so that she could talk to the other girls. She then added, "Besides, I may have become keen on SEC thanks to both 𝗬𝗵𝗲 and Izuku's memories. But that does not mean that I'll readily spread my legs for just any boy who wants to have SEC with me, especially not the likes of Mineta or Bakugo." Surprised that Momo could actually give a reasonably composed and dignified reply in spite of having SEC with Izuku, Mina swore, "Hot damn, she's good." Ochako pouted and said, "I'm definitely not going to lose to her when it comes to loving and satisfying Deku." "Well, you better be ready for some stiff competition, Ochako-chan, because I'm pretty sure none of us are planning to lose to anyone when it comes to being the best in Izuku's 𝗏𝗏, said Mina, who grinned at her. "Oh, aren't you girls forgetting something?" asked 𝗬𝗵𝗲, who was mentally communicating with everyone in Toru's room. Suddenly, 𝗬𝗵𝗲 brain-jacked 𝗲𝗪 and shoved 𝗲𝗪's ear-jacks into Mina's and Toru's vaginas. Neither Mina nor Toru had time to react before brain-jacked 𝗲𝗪 made her ear-jacks vibrate. While Mina and Toru gasped from the pleasure, 𝗲𝗪 smirked at them and said, "I may be willing to give Ochako-chan and Tsuyu-chan a free pass to take the seat of best girl in Izuku's harem, but that does not mean I'm going to let anyone else take that spot without a fight." Overwhelmed by pleasure, Mina and Toru mem as they both thought, "𝗲𝗪-chan's ear-jacks are awesome and 𝗬𝗵𝗲-chan's so unfair." "It seems that the other girls are getting awfully rowdy, don't you think?" asked Momo, who smiled in a way which could only be described as stuck. "Well, Mina-chan and Toru-chan have always been energetic," said Izuku, who smiled in spite of awkward conversation. "True enough," agreed Momo, who then said, "Also, I think it's time for our passionate lovemaking to reach its climax." As soon as Momo finished her statement, she moved her hips vigorously, which caused Izuku to almost orgasm. Izuku gritted his teeth as he tried to avoid climaxing prematurely. Turned on by his response, Momo moved her hips even faster while she hugged Izuku in such a way that his face was buried deep into her cleavage. It did not take long for Izuku to climax, and his hot seed made Momo orgasm as well. Exhausted by his sixth climax, Izuku fell asleep in Momo's arms. Amused by his childlike sleeping expression and understanding his exhaustion, Momo gently stroked his hair as though he was her child. Realizing that Izuku needed to rest, and the fact that it was already past midnight, everyone agreed to get some sleep and opted to sleep together in Toru's room after locking the door. Everyone, except for Mei, who was not with them and was feeling hot and bothered for arguably the very first time in her life, slept soundly that night. The following morning, Shuta's right eye was twitching as he stared into Toru's room. Earlier that morning, 𝐎𝐩𝐢𝐫 was notified by Tenya that Izuku was missing from his room, again, and genius-level intellect was not required to deduce where Izuku had gone to. As the homeroom teacher of Class 1A, he was obligated to investigate the matter even though his rationality was practically screaming at him to turn around and walk away from the issue before it was too late. Therefore, he begrudgingly made his way to Ochako and Tsuyu's rooms with the assumption that Izuku was sleeping with either one of them or both of them. However, with the help of MSTR key card which gave him access to all the rooms in the dorms in case of an emergency, he realized that both Ochako and Tsuyu were not in their respective rooms. His dread grew as Mina, Momo and even Jiru's rooms were also empty. By the time he stood before Toru's room, he was seriously considering the merit of running for the hills to save his own sanity when he forced himself to open the door. Just as he had feared, Izuku was asleep in Toru's room together with not only the invisible girl but also the other 5 girls of Class 1A. Izuku peacefully asleep and was sitting on a mattress which was taken from Jiru's room to be placed onto the floor of Toru's room. Sitting at his sides were Ochako and Tsuyu, who were contentedly leaning against him as they hugged onto his scarred arms. Mina on the other hand was leaning against Izuku's chest and was curled up like a small kitten with a smile on her cheeky face. Momo and Jiru were practically embracing one another while Toru was hugging onto Mina from behind. Also, all 7 of them were naked and the room reeked of sweat and bodily fluids. 𝐎𝐩𝐢𝐫 idly noted that Tenya, who had insisted on coming along to help him as the class representative of Class 1A, was so shocked by the perverse sight that his spectacles cracked. How did he even manage to do this? Thought 𝐎𝐩𝐢𝐫, who so badly wanted to slam his head onto a wall repeatedly out of sheer frustration. Somehow, within a time span of merely 4 nights, Midoriya Izuku had graduated from being a mere problem child to being the greatest bane of rational sanity 𝐎𝐩𝐢𝐫 had ever known. He was very tempted to expel Izuku and his entire harem, but Nedzu made it clear that he would do no such thing without the principal's authorization. Glaring at the 7 students who were blissfully asleep, 𝐎𝐩𝐢𝐫 gritted his teeth and thought, "To hell with professionalism and rationality." He then shouted their names. Later that day, Izuku and the 6 girls of Class 1A were blushing as they all stood before Nedzu, who was very amused by their situation as he asked, "So tell me, Midoriya-kun, how in the world did you manage to convince your 4 remaining classmates to be in your harem and consummate your relationship with them all within a single night?" Standing beside Nedzu was Toshinori, who could not decide if he should be proud or be mortified by Izuku's latest achievement. Well, it all started with Toru-chan being troubled by certain things that Tsuyu-chan has already told you about, explained Izuku, who then added, "So I decided to help her out and things well escalated from there." Momo cleared her throat to get everyone's attention and said, "To be perfectly fair, we all overheard Izuku's passionate lovemaking with Ochako-chan and Tsuyu-chan 2 nights ago, and that made us hot and bothered for the lack of a less inappropriate term. Not to mention that Mina-chan's message about Izuku's SXL prowess did nothing to calm our SXL urges," added Jiru, who was still sore from the previous night and was blushing at the fact that something so large had somehow managed to enter her maiden womanhood. "Plus, Izuku's a pretty swell guy after we got to know him real intimately even before we even did anything SXL, said Mina. "And Yamanaka-san had done nothing to influence your decision?" asked Nedzu, whose tone became a bit more serious. All 6 girls shook their heads and Toru argued, "She showed us memories of Deku and her past, but she never tried to convince us to join the harem. None of us had a boyfriend either at the time, so it's not like we had any reason to say no," added Mina. That said, she did make it clear that she's not letting anyone other than Ochako-chan and Tsuyu-chan claim the place of Izuku's best girl in the harem unopposed, said Jiru, who then blushed as she added, "Which she proved by taking over my body and using my ear jacks to do things that I'd rather not mention in public." Mina, Toru and even Toshinori blushed at Jiru's statement. Seemingly satisfied by their responses, Nedzu said, "Well then, since Yaoyorozu-san, Kyuka-san, Ashido-san and Hagakure-san have all agreed to join Izuku's harem by their own free will, influenced by shared memories as they may have been, I have no reason to take any further action against any of you. That said, you might want to keep your less than pure activities in check." Nedzu sighed in a fax dramatic manner as he explained, I'm afraid that Ida-san has been traumatized by the sight he that saw earlier this morning, and I already have to dissuade Aizawa-san from quitting his job as your homeroom teacher. There's also Kiyama-san who's demanding me to allow her to be Aizawa-san's replacement as the homeroom teacher of Class 1A. Well aware that Midnight, who was also known as 𝗂𝐵 had probably already known about their RDC activities, Izuku and the girls of Class 1A blushed as they wondered just what kinds of things she would have done to them if given the chance. For all they knew, having her as their homeroom teacher might make things even worse than Shoyuta ever would. Seemingly unaware of their fears of having Namuri as their new homeroom teacher, 𝗫𝗠 said, "Anyway, I would like to make a few announcements to the 7 of you concerning Midoriya." Surprised by the shout, everyone turned their attention towards the door, which burst open to reveal Higuri, who seemed out of breath as though he had been running for the whole day. As soon as he laid eyes on Izuku, he stomped his way towards him and grabbed his shoulders before he yelled, "What the bloody F did you do to her?" "Excuse me?" asked Izuku. "Don't play dumb with me, you damned playboy," yelled Higuri, who shook Izuku as though he was a rag doll as he continued to speak. "This morning, 𝗧𝗵𝗲 created some kind of mechanical abomination with VBRTR-tipped tentacles which tried to RP her and her female peers. Hell, it almost deflowered me when I rushed in to stop it." "Oh my," said Momo, who was both surprised and interested about Mei's latest baby. Izuku paled as he asked, "Did anyone get violated by that thing?" Higuri shook his head and replied, "Thankfully no. However, it definitely SRPD and molested them, and 𝗓𝗪𝗏 actually said that she was working out her SXL frustration when she made the damn thing." His glare hardened as he added, "And we both know exactly who's the idiot responsible for making her like that today." Izuku smiled nervously as he argued, "To be fair, you did tell me to try and woo her so that she would stop making explosions in the workshop yesterday." Higuri's left eye twitched as he growled, "And I'm seriously regretting that decision." 𝗫𝗠 cleared his throat to get everyone's attention and then said, "Speaking of 𝗧𝗵𝗲-san, I would like to make an announcement." The mouse-like quirked animal turned his attention to Toshinori, who nodded in response before he turned his attention back to the others to say, "In a few days' time, Melissa Shield will be transferred from her school on Island to be a student of the support department here in U High School." Shocked, Izuku asked, What? "Yesterday, 𝗧𝗵𝗲-san approached me and suggested to me that Shield-san should be transferred to this school as both a third-year student and an assistant teacher of the support department," explained 𝗫𝗠, who then added, "As for how and why 𝗧𝗵𝗲-san would make such a suggestion, let's just say that it has to do with this year's Expo incident and how Midoriya-san played a role in helping All Might defeat Wolfram with the help of a certain support equipment that was destroyed during the fight." Realization dawned upon Izuku and his harem as the green-haired young man asked, Is 𝗧𝗵𝗲-san actually going to work together with Shield-san to recreate and improve on the full gauntlet?" 𝗫𝗠 nodded in confirmation and replied, "Amongst other support items." Shocked by the revelation, Higuri let go of Izuku and asked 𝗫𝗠, "But why? Why would 𝗧𝗵𝗲 ask for help? That's not like her at all." "To answer that question, all you have to do is look at the young man at your side, Majima-san," answered 𝗫𝗠. While Higuri turned his attention towards Izuku with an amazed expression on his face, 𝗫𝗠 continued to explain, "As the creator of the full gauntlet, there is no denying that Shield-san is a genius in her own right and that a high school will benefit from having her here." "Are you sure that it's all right for her to come here?" asked Momo, who then added, "I mean no offense, but Island's security and technological facilities are even greater than High School." "Which are undoubtedly true, Yaoyorozu-san," admitted 𝗫𝗠, who then said, "However, given the fact that her father, David Shield, played a role in causing the Expo incident, Melissa Shield had been facing difficulties among her peers and fellow researchers ever since." Shocked by 𝗫𝗠's statement, Izuku asked, "But why? She didn't do anything wrong." "That is certainly true, but the fact that she is his daughter is reason enough for some humans to judge her as though she is a co-conspirator of the incident which had put innocent people at risk and damaged Island's reputation." 𝗫𝗠's bitter tone was not lost to anyone as he continued to speak. "In light of both 𝗧𝗵𝗲-san's request and Shield-san's difficult situation, I have decided to allow her to be transferred to High school with All Might's permission. Toshinori nodded and said, for the sake of keeping her safe and preventing her from feeling isolated, she will be staying in the same dormitory as Class 1A. Izuku and his HRM did not fail to notice the growing blush on Toshinori's face as he added, in spite of recent events involving Midoriya Shounen, there's little doubt that she will be most comfortable with people whom she already has a positive relationship with. I believe I do not need to explain that Midoriya Shounen has played a key role in not only stopping Wolfram but also in rescuing her father. Izuku blushed at both the recognition and the very real possibility that Melissa might end up joining the HRM as well. While I'm not going to argue against having Shield-san in our school, I can't help but not agree with the idea of her staying in Class 1A's dorm, said Higuri, who then pointed his thumb at Izuku as he explained, regardless of the fact that she will be with people whom she knows, there's no way she will not be affected by the fact that she's staying in the same dormitory as Midoriya here, whom, I'm sure you all have heard by now, is already in a rather NTMT relationship with at least 2 girls. Izuku and his HRM blushed at Higuri's statement and understandably refused to correct it. That is certainly a valid concern under most circumstances, Mme-san, but both All Might and I can assure you that Izuku will not allow harm to befall upon her, said 𝗫𝗠. Well, if you say so, then I guess that there's little else I can say in the matter, said Higuri, who then threw an angry glare at Izuku and said, and you better settle things with 𝗧𝗵𝗲 before she creates any more ridiculous perverted creations. Izuku stood straight at attention and yelped in fright, why yes sir. Just as Higuri was about to leave, he paused and asked Izuku, also, did you seriously have 𝐸 with all the girls in your class? Aizawa-san was grumbling about corny problem children when I saw him, and I can't help but notice all those girls with you right now. Izuku looked down as he bashfully admitted, why yes, I did. The girls present in the office blushed as well as they tried to find anything that was not named Izuku, Higuri, 𝗫𝗠 or Toshinori to look at. And why shouldn't any of the adults here be worried about this development? Asked Higuri, who was not sure if he should be aghast at the fact or give Izuku a thumbs up. That's because I've already discussed the matter with Midoriya-san and his HRM. I can assure you that the girls agreed to be in his HRM by their own free will, explained 𝗫𝗠. Seriously? Asked Higuri. When he received nods from both 𝗫𝗠 and Toshinori, Higuri rubbed his chin and said to Izuku, well, 𝗧𝗵𝗲, you must be quite the lover boy to be able to nab so many girls so quickly after the summer camp incident. Anyway, I have to leave now. The last thing I want is leaving 𝗧𝗵𝗲 unsupervised and letting her make another tentacled mechanical monstrosity. After Higuri left 𝗫𝗠's office, 𝗫𝗠 smiled cheekily at Izuku and said, speaking of being a lover boy, I am considering letting 𝗧𝗵𝗲-san move to the Class 1A dorm as well. Surprised, 𝗔𝗫 asked, are you sure that's a good idea, 𝗫𝗠-sensei? I can understand Shield-san since some of us were there during the 𝐼-EXPO incident and she needs our support, but won't letting 𝗧𝗵𝗲-san move into our dorm cause people to ask questions. True, but don't forget the reason why Izuku is even forming his HRM in the first place, said 𝗫𝗠. Realizing what 𝗫𝗠 was trying to do, Momo asked, are you actually deliberately making a situation which would cause a certain someone reveal himself? That's precisely what I'm doing, Yaoyorozu-san, confirmed 𝗫𝗠, who then admitted, although I must admit that even I have underestimated Midoriya-san's ability to impress members of the opposite section. Izuku blushed in embarrassment as he tried to steer the conversation away from an embarrassing topic that he would rather not talk about by asking, about that, is there anything that you have managed to find out about Toru-chan's tracking beacon? Given the fact that I only received the information from Azui-san yesterday, as well as the fact that I had to make special arrangements to get Shield-san transferred to you. High school, I'm afraid that I have not uncovered anything notable at the moment. However, be rest assured that I will inform you all as soon as I find something important that requires your immediate attention, replied 𝗫𝗠. Izuku accepted 𝗫𝗠's response and decided to not press on the matter further, so he asked, what about the HRM plan? Am I still obligated to follow it through? I'm afraid that you still are, Midoriya-san, replied 𝗫𝗠 before he explained, at the very least, you'll need to find out if any of the female students of Class 1B are a threat to you and your HRM or not. Once you have settled things with the girls of Class 1B, You'll be free to do as you wish, which includes not taking in any more girls for your harem. Izuku sighed and said, I just hope that I can cope with having a harem of more than 10 girls. Just my classmates alone are already a lot for my mind and body to handle. He then sheepishly spoke to the girls, no offense meant by the way. None taken, Izuku, said Momo, who, like the other girls in the office, were amused by Izuku's admission of his limits. It was a good thing for Izuku that the girls of Class 1A were not against giving love to one another. Anyway, I have already taken enough of your time. You all may return to class, said Netsu. Izuku shuddered as the dreaded meeting the rest of his classmates later in Class 1A. Midoriya, you lucky son of a bitch, yelled Minoru as he leapt onto Izuku and held onto his collar so that he could glare right into his eyes. How in the hell did you manage to bang not only Uraraka-chan and Azui-chan but every girl in this class, including Yaoyorozu-chan? Shouted Denki, who was no less jealous of Izuku's achievement. Tell us your DMN's secret already, you freaking playboy, demanded Hanta. Intimidated by the three boys who were even more jealously furious than before, Izuku turned his attention to Ida and Shudo and asked, a little help here, please. Ida glared at Izuku and replied, considering the state that you were in when I found you this morning, I do not feel inclined to help you get out of this particular predicament. Shudo shrugged and said, you just had to see with all the girls in our class, within 4 nights of staying in the dorms no less. Of course there will be consequences regardless of the reasons behind it. Unable to deny the logic in their statements, Izuku turned his attention back to the 3 furious boys before him and smiled nervously as he asked the first thing he could think of, does the fact that I can satisfy all of them in bed in a single night help explain anything? A moment of stunned silence passed before Izuku fully realized what he had just said and thought to himself, oh, see nuggets. Jiru slapped her hand onto her blushing face as she grumbled, Midori, you idiot. Sumimo had a deadpan expression on her mental image as she mentally spoke to Izuku, as much as I love you, Izuku-an, even I know that you have just dug yourself deeper. Are you implying that you managed to shoot a full load in all 6 girls and satisfy all of them in a single night? Asked Minoru, who looked as though he was about to evolve into the next demon lord. Izuku could only meekly reply, yes, Minoru. Denki and Hanta glared at Izuku as comically bloody tears of envy flowed from their eyes. Minoru then growled, you better watch your back when it's time for training because we're so going to kick your butt for this. A short while later Izuku was running for his life as Minoru, Denki and Hanta chased after him with murder in their eyes. As for why they were chasing after him, aside from the obvious jealousy that they were feeling towards him, Shoyuda gave them permission after they essentially demanded him for a chance to gang up on Izuku. Officially, Shoyuda allowed it on the grounds that a hero should be prepared to face many villains at the same time, much like how he had to face multiple villains during the USJ incident. Of course, Izuku, Sumimo and the girls in Class 1A all suspected that Shoyuda was also punishing Izuku indirectly by letting the 3 furious boys gang up on him. The fact that Shoyuda smirked at Izuku's paled expression was a rather clear indication. Even so, they could not bring themselves to fault Shoyuda or even the 3 jealous boys, as there was no denying that Izuku had not only gotten himself a harem but even had kissy with every girl in Class 1A. Even Katsuki wanted to join the 3 jealous boys in ganging up on Izuku for the simple sadistic reason of wanting to beat him up. Luckily for the green-haired boy, Shoyuda decided against letting him help Minoru, Denki and Hanta beat up Izuku on the grounds of wanting the other 3 boys to learn how to fight together. If he had allowed Katsuki to join, they would not be able to learn or train as much as Katsuki would no doubt do everything in his power to beat up Izuku on his own. In spite of being angry at being denied a chance to beat up Izuku, Katsuki was forced to accept Shuda's decision and reasoning. Katsuki's displeasure only grew when he noticed the girls of Class 1A giving him dirty looks when he wanted to join in beating up Izuku. As much as Katsuki hated to admit it, he found their cold, disdainful glares upsetting. As for the other boys in the class, they opted to do their own training as they developed their respective finishing moves. Back to Izuku, he was busy dodging Minoru's purple ball when Hanta successfully wrapped his arm with his tape. Izuku was about to attempt pulling Hanta towards himself when he realized that Hanta had not only severed the tape from his enlarged right elbow but also passed the tape to a smirking Denki. Realizing what was about to happen, Izuku called upon the power of his quirk to tear the tough tape into two with his bare hands. However, Denki's electricity was undoubtedly faster as it still managed to electrocute Izuku just as he had managed to tear the tape into two. To make matters worse for Izuku, Minoru took that chance to restrain him by throwing his sticky ball onto his feet. "Yes, we managed to get the lucky son of a beach," yelled Hanta. 𝗏𝗪𝗓 smirked as he was not only pleased with the fact that Izuku was getting some much-deserved punishment but also the fact that the three jealous perverts managed to work so well together. He was especially pleased with the fact that Denki and Hanta worked together to overcome Denki's issues with his electrical abilities by using Hanta's tape as a conductor for his electrical attack. In spite of being electrocuted, Izuku suddenly surged with the power of one for all as he glared at the three with almost uncharacteristic anger and determination in his eyes. 𝗏𝗪𝗓 then remembered that Izuku, who had just been electrocuted by Denki's electrical attack, had a copy of 𝗬𝗵𝗲 in his head and paled as he thought, "Oh, see." Denki, Hanta, and Minoru, who did not know that Izuku had a copy of 𝗬𝗵𝗲 in his head, were shocked to see the anger and determination in his eyes as he used 7% of one for all to not only tear off his reinforced boots with his bare hands, thereby freeing himself from Minoru's ball, but also move at blinding speed to kick Hanta in the stomach and send him flying. Shocked and even scared by Izuku's unexpectedly violent response, Denki used his quirk to indiscriminately electrocute everything nearby around him. Well aware of Denki's quirk, Izuku quickly jumped high to get out of range. After Denki shorted his own brain due to overusing his quirk, and became a giggling idiot as a result, Izuku delivered a quick kick to incapacitate him before turning his attention towards the last member of the trio, Minoru. Not surprisingly, Minoru ran away and hid to avoid retribution. Deciding not to waste time on finding the little pervert, Izuku mentally asked 𝗬𝗵𝗲, "𝗬𝗵𝗲-chan, are you all right?" 𝗬𝗵𝗲 groaned in pain and said, "Yeah, I'm okay. That electric attack really got us both." Left unsaid was that her screams of pain due to having one of her physical copies electrocuted was heard by all the girls in the harem, who immediately looked at Izuku's direction with worried looks on their faces. She did not want to mention that detail to Izuku, who was already feeling guilty about letting her copy in his head get hurt by the attack. 𝗏𝗪𝗓 sighed at the turn of events, as well as his own lack of foresight, and said, "Midoriya, please take Denki and Hanta to the infirmary. Minoru, please get out of hiding and continue with your training." While Izuku nodded at 𝗏𝗪𝗓 and proceeded to pick up both Denki and Hanta like sacks of potatoes to bring them to the infirmary, Minoru fearfully came out of hiding and swore, "That was bloody scary." Later that day, Izuku and the girls of Class 1A blinked in surprise when they saw Mei pushing a trolley which was loaded with boxes towards the dorms of Class 1A. He therefore had to ask, "𝗧𝗵𝗲-san, are you moving into our dorm already?" "Pretty much. 𝗫𝗠𝗠-sensei wants me to be present when our special guest arrives, and 𝗫𝗫𝗏𝗺-sensei thinks that letting me stay at the support department dorm is too much of a risk to be allowed after what happened this morning," replied Mei. Izuku paled as he recalled about Mei's mechanical abomination, and asked, "Are you planning to build some kind of SEC machine at the dorms?" "Pretty much," confirmed Mei, who then explained, "I was trying to create a baby which can move independently and is easy to clean and maintain after use, but my first prototype malfunctioned and 𝗫𝗫𝗏𝗺-sensei had to destroy it before it raped everyone in my class. I was planning to bring back the broken pieces and rebuild that baby in my room when 𝗫𝗫𝗏𝗺-sensei quickly told me to move to your dorm instead." No wonder 𝗫𝗫𝗏𝗺-sensei wanted her to move out of the support department dorm so quickly, thought Izuku, 𝗬𝗵𝗲, and the girls of Class 1A. As fascinating as your creation may be, shouldn't you be focusing on making actual support items for the students of the hero course? Asked Momo. Don't worry about it. I'll get the job done before any of you know it, replied Mei, who then excitedly added, "Besides, if that baby works as intended, I can easily modify it to do so much more, like helping me to build more babies and maybe even act as a security drone just like the ones on Island." Izuku was actually impressed by Mei's idea and said, "That's actually a pretty good idea, 𝗧𝗵𝗲-san." Happy to have someone agree with her, Mei eagerly added, I'm actually planning to make this baby modular so that I can attach different kinds of tentacles onto it. That way, this baby can be equipped with anything from vibrating dildos to steel-crushing claws and metal-cutting laser beams. Mina had a thoughtful expression on her face as she asked May, "So you're basically making the Sentinels from the Matrix film series, right?" "Matrix film series?" asked May. Unlike Tsuyu and Ochako, the other girls in his harem had not shared their memories with one another, which was why May was not aware that Mina had a love for pre-Quirk-era films such as Aliens, The Matrix, Predator, and Terminator. They're basically flying robots with tentacles which are strong enough to break armored ships apart and capture people, explained Mina. "Flying tentacled robots, you say?" asked May, who was already considering the possibility of creating a flying version of the baby she had in mind. "Anyway, do you want us to help you? We're already heading back to the dorm after all," asked Izuku. May grinned happily and said, "Sure, those things are pretty heavy." Inwardly, May thought, "And I'm definitely going to get some special time with Izuku tonight." Some sleeping arrangements, 2 schoolmates and a teacher after Izuku and the girls of Class 1A helped May to move into her new room, which was next to Tsuyu's room. They received a text message from Nedzu which made them blush as it stated, "Due to recent events, I have decided that it would be best that Midoriya-san is allowed access into one of the empty rooms on the girls' side of the dorm. The room will be a common bedroom, where he can sleep with other people. Think of this as my way of supporting the plan that I have made all of you do for the sake of helping this school and possibly even hero society itself as a whole." "Well, Nedzu-sensei's certainly generous if nothing else," said Izuku. "Too generous if you ask me." Surprised, everyone turned their attention towards the speaker, who turned out to be Shoyuta. He glared at them as he gave Izuku a pair of key cards and said, "While Hatsum and Shield-san will be staying on the 5th floor with Yaoyorozu and Azui, the common bedroom will be on the 4th floor next to Uraraka's room." His glare intensified as he added, "Personally, I do not like this idiotic plan one bit, but there's no denying that it has at least confirmed that none of the girls in Class 1A is a spy or even a sleeper agent, and even gave us a possible lead due to the discovery of certain tracking beacon in 𝐒𝐻𝐾ure. Just don't make me regret not doing anything to stop it." His expression became bitter as he continued to speak. "Even if this is ultimately Nedzu's plan, there's no way for any of you to avoid being perceived negatively by others for one reason or another once everyone knows about it." "Are you actually worried for us?" asked Ochako. Shoyuta turned around with a huff and said, "Please, I'm your homeroom teacher. Of course I'm worried no matter how much I try to deny it." "Aizawa-sensei, thank you," said Izuku, who had a grateful smile on his face. Shuta's mouth twitched into a small smile before he gruffly replied, "Just settle things quickly with Class 1B and try not to get even more girls in your 𝐻𝐻𝐾." Izuku blushed and sheepishly said, "I can't promise anything about not letting any more girls join the 𝐻𝐻𝐾. I didn't even expect everyone in my class to decide that I'm worthwhile sharing as a lover." Realizing that Izuku was being sincere, Shoyuta sighed and said, "Just try all right. For both our sakes." Shoyuta then left the room as he thought to himself, if he somehow gets even more girls in his harem, he'll be forever remembered in history as the infamous harem king, Deku. Sometime later, Izuku sighed in exhausted relief as he had just finished bringing some of his belongings into the common bedroom. Although he did not need to bring much to the common bedroom, the fact that all the boys knew that he was basically moving into the girls' side of the dorms made the move a very embarrassing experience for him. The jealous looks that he received from Mineta, Denki and Hanta, as well as Tenya's disapproving glare, did nothing to ease his nerves. "You sure this is everything you need?" asked Ochako. Izuku smiled sheepishly as he explained, "Well, I didn't want to bring everything from my actual room to this one since it's meant to be a common room for everyone to sleep together in." Unlike his actual room, which was filled with all kinds of All Might merchandise, the common bedroom was mostly bare with only futon mattresses, pillows, cushions, blankets, and a foldable table which could be converted into a kotatsu. Ochako smiled understandingly and said, "I suppose that's for the best. Besides, you can always well hang out with us if you feel lonely being in here by yourself." Both Izuku and Ochako blushed as they looked away from one another bashfully. 𝗬𝗵𝗲 then mentally spoke to them with a deadpan expression on her mental image. How in the world can you two still be so pure and innocent even after everything that has been happening for the past few days? Well, we have liked one another even before this whole HRM thing started, so I guess that counts as a reason, replied Izuku. The door into the common bedroom opened to reveal Momo and 𝗂𝐽𝐽, who then entered the room. 𝗂𝐽𝐽 looked around the room and said, "You sure you got everything that you need? This room's pretty bare." "Yes, I'm sure. Besides, even I don't think anyone will like the idea of making out in a room with All Might's merchandise all over the place," replied Izuku. 𝗂𝐽𝐽 shuddered in disgust as she admitted, "Okay, good point. Anyway, I believe we should start discussing about finding a way to get the girls in Class 1B, said Momo, who took out a cushion to sit on it. "Considering that they are in another class, there won't be many opportunities to get them even if some of them are on good terms with you girls," said Izuku, who was rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "Luckily for us, I can get into contact with Kendo-san, who might be able to help us get the others in her class," said Momo, who was speaking about Kendo Itsuka, a spirited girl with teal eyes, ginger hair that was tied into a ponytail on the left side of her head and was dubbed the big sister of Class 1B. "We might even be able to get in touch with Shiozaki-san and Kodai-san," said 𝗂𝐽𝐽, who was speaking about Kodai Yui, a quiet girl with shoulder-length, bob-shaped black hair and a neutral expression on her face, and Shiozaki Ibra, a religious Christian girl with green thorn-covered vines for hair and squinted dark green eyes. "Do you think we should try to get all three of them to come together? We can tell them that it is about relationships," said 𝗬𝗵𝗲, who was mentally talking to Izuku, Ochako, Momo and 𝗂𝐽𝐽. "Having more girls from that class at the very start will certainly be good, but we have to be careful. We cannot afford to cause a misunderstanding, if you get what I mean," said Izuku. Momo nodded in understanding and said, "So we'll just focus on Kendo-san then. I'll try to get her to meet with me tomorrow." "You might want to have one of us with you just in case anything goes wrong," said Izuku. 𝗂𝐽𝐽 quickly raised her hand and said, "I'll go with Momo. My ear jacks will allow me to hear if anyone else is nearby." Izuku nodded at 𝗂𝐽𝐽 and then said, "With any luck, we can settle this HRM plan before we have to take our provisional hero license exam. Speaking of the HRM plan, do you think we should consider including Shield-san?" asked Momo. Izuku blushed and admitted, "Honestly, I'd rather not drag her into this, but considering that she'll be living with us, she should know about it at the very least. Which means that we'll be inviting her to join the HRM just like the girls of Class 1B, said 𝗂𝐽𝐽. "Basically," agreed Izuku. "Speaking of harems, there's one thing that we need to address," said Momo. "What would that be?" asked Ochako. Momo locked the door into the common bedroom and checked the window before she got closer to Ochako, Izuku and 𝗂𝐽𝐽. Realizing that she wanted a mental communication, none of them protested as 𝗬𝗵𝗲's slimy pink tentacles emerged from her ears and entered their ears. She mentally said, "While it is true that Yamanaka-san has not actually tried to influence us into joining Izuku's HRM, we shouldn't ignore the possibility that her emotions and thoughts can affect us as much as she can be affected by ours." "What makes you say that?" asked Izuku. Momo turned her attention towards Izuku and explained, "Earlier today, you were attacked by Kaminari-san's electric attack, which also harmed Yamanaka-san's copy inside your head. While neither of you were badly hurt, thankfully, there is no denying that she was in pain, which I, and the other girls in the HRM as well, sensed." "Wait, you could sense her pain from the attack?" asked Izuku, who was shocked about it. 𝗂𝐽𝐽 scratched the back of her head as she spoke, more like we could actually hear her scream in pain, which got us all worried for a bit. To be fair, getting electrocuted is generally an unpleasant experience unless you're a genuine MSCST or have a quirk which makes use of the received electricity, said Momo. "But if a cry of pain can reach out to all the brain-jacked people," said Izuku, who was beginning to realize the implications, "then there is a strong possibility that her cries of pleasure could reach everyone as well," said Ochako, who had a blush on her face. "Not to say that you guys are completely wrong, but I'm not that lacking in control. If I was, all of you would have heard me in pleasure the whole time you guys had your org," argued 𝗬𝗵𝗲, who then added, "You frickin' ask Mina-chan. She only realized that I was drowning in pleasure when she asked me to touch her pages." "That may be true, Yamanaka-san, But the last thing we need is everyone with your copies in their heads sensing your 𝗧𝗃𝗧 even by accident, said Momo, who blushed as she asked, "Can you imagine how awkward it would be if we all somehow found out that you were sexually aroused by something at an inappropriate time? Never mind the girls who have your copies in their heads and yet have decided to not actually join the 𝐒𝐻𝐚. Even I would not want to know about it while I'm doing something important such as attending to my duties as vice representative of Class 1A. 𝗬𝗵𝗲's mental image smirked cheekily as she asked, "Oh, is that so? I seem to recall you being very eager to use your version PP to 𝐬𝐚𝐥 big PPU dry after watching the other girls have EC with him." Momo blushed at 𝗬𝗵𝗲's vulgar statement and argued, "While I certainly cannot deny that there is such a thing such as a proper time, place and occasion for what we do. Do you honestly think that getting distracted by your 𝗧𝗃𝗧 would be of any good in a situation that demands focus and attention such as during hero training or, worse, during a villain attack?" "Okay, you've made your point," said 𝗬𝗵𝗲, who was willing to admit that Momo's argument made sense. "So, should we consider letting the girls go if they decide against joining the 𝐻𝐚?" asked 𝗃𝗧𝗪. "That's one possibility to consider, although we will need to discuss the matter with 𝗧𝗪𝗧-sensei," said Momo. "Then let's do that before Shield-san arrives," said Izuku, who then blushed and added, "Also, we might want to consider forming some sort of arrangement for our 𝗧𝗃𝗧 needs." As much as Izuku hated to admit it, his energy had been increasing lately even without 𝗬𝗵𝗲's direct influence, and he knew something had to be done about it. "Oh, about that, I've actually already planned a simple system," said Momo. "Really?" asked 𝗃𝗧𝗪, who was admittedly curious about it. "Yes, although it would be best that we get everyone in here before I announce my suggestion," said Momo. No one argued against Momo's decision and thus got everyone in the HRM to gather in the common bedroom. A short while later, Izuku and his current HRM were all seated on cushions and futons as they listened to Momo, who said, "As you all should know by now, with the exception of Hatsum-san, we are all in a 𝗧𝗃𝗧 relationship with Izuku. However, we must acknowledge the fact that Izuku, as mighty as his 𝗧𝗃𝗧 stamina and prowess may be, is still just one man and may not be able to consistently satisfy all of us every time, especially if the HRM grows any larger in the future. We must also acknowledge the fact that having too much SEC will wear him down, which will negatively affect his ability as both a lover and a hero." "Are you suggesting some sort of schedule in which we take turns in having SEC with Aizu-chan, Kero?" asked Tsuyu. "Essentially, yes," said Momo, who then said, "Therefore, I would like to suggest that the girls take turns to form pairs to spend the night with Izuku in the common bedroom. Not that I'm against the idea, but what about the odd girl out? There are 7 girls in the HRM right now after all," said May. "I have already thought of a way to resolve the issue," replied Momo, who then said, "To make things simple and potentially exciting, I propose a randomized selection process so that we are not always together with the same girl when we form pairs. As for the odd girl out, she may choose one of 2 options: join with a selected pair to form a trio, or choose one girl at random to form a 4th pair." "Why does the odd girl out have only those 2 options?" asked Kyuka, who then said, "Surely there's nothing wrong with the idea of a girl having Midori all for herself just for one night. As appealing as that may be, I have the distinct feeling that Izuku's stamina may be too much for most of us to handle alone. He did pleasure 6 of us in a single night after all," said Momo, who then added, "Also, for this HRM lifestyle to work, we need to be able to get along with one another instead of constantly competing for Izuku's affections." "Sounds reasonable, Kero," said Tsuyu, who gave 𝗃𝗧𝗪 a knowing look. 𝗃𝗧𝗪 looked away from Momo, Izuku and Tsuyu with a sheepish expression on her face, as she was aware of the fact that she was not above feeling competitive when it came to Izuku's affections. Mina suddenly raised her hand and asked, "What if there's an emergency and one girl from a pair ends up being absent for the night? Does the remaining girl have Midori for herself, or does she need to pick a girl to form a new pair?" "For reasons which I have already stated just now, she will have to pick a girl to form a new pair," said Momo, who then added, "That said, she is allowed to pick a girl of her own choosing instead of having to do another random selection." "What about the absentee?" asked Toru. "What happens to her will largely depend on the circumstances behind her absence. I'm sure I do not need to tell anyone that many of us here are training to be pro heroes who would have to face all kinds of difficult and even dangerous situations, answered Momo. Are we allowed to make changes after the random selection? Asked Kyuka, who then explained, don't get me wrong, I'd love to have SEC with Midori again, but my girly bits are still sore from last night, so having SEC tonight is a no-no for me. Changes can be made but only if the involved parties agree that the changes are necessary, said Momo. One last question, Yamamoto, said Mina, who then grinned as she asked, is a pair allowed to attack Midori outside the common bedroom? It took a moment for Momo to process Mina's question before she blushed and said, Shido-san, why would you even consider such a thing? Her blush deepened as she added, in case you haven't noticed, we're already on thin ice as it is, and I'm quite certain not even Nezu-sensei will approve of us acting inappropriately during school hours. Not only that, everyone already knows that I'm in a physical relationship with at least 2 girls, so no amount of sneaking around will be enough for any of us to avoid suspicion, said Izuku. Sorry, couldn't resist thinking about the kind of crazy risky SEC we can try out, said Mina, who was obviously not apologetic. Realizing that Mina was probably going to attack Izuku during school hours regardless, Momo sighed and said, I'd suggest against it due to the risks involved, but should the need arises, I'd highly recommend discretion. We do not need to make a full-blown public scandal after all. Mina grinned cheekily as she nudged Toru and said, You hear that, Toru-chan? Yamamo's recommending discretion. Izuku, Momo, Kyuka and Ochako sighed as both Mina and Toru giggled. Anyway, let's not have any further delays, said Momo, who used her quirk to create a box and 7 ball which were the size of golf ball and were labeled odd, first A, first B, second A, second B, third A and third C. She then gave the ball which was labeled first A to Mei and said, since you have not had AC with Izuku yet, it's only fair that you are allowed to have AC with him first tonight. Mei grinned and replied, thanks, I was getting pretty frustrated ever since yesterday. Momo placed the rest of the ball into the box and asked, Izuku, if you may do the honors of shaking the box. Izuku obliged and shook the box vigorously, causing the ball to bounce around as a result. After a while, Izuku stopped shaking the box and Momo said, girls, please take turns to place your hand into the box to take out a ball. Given the nature of my quirk, I will be the last to take a ball out. Before long, all the girls had taken out a ball each, and it went as follows. First pair, Momo and Mei. Second pair, Kyuka and Toru. Third pair, Ochako and Mina. Odd. Tfu. After all the girls had taken a ball each, Tsuyu raised her hand and said, mind if I join you two tonight, Momo-chan, Hatsum-chan. Momo nodded with a smile and said, of course, Azui-san. However, please note that Mei will be the first one tonight. Tsuyu nodded and replied, no problem, Karo. Ochako, on the other hand, was unhappy as she groaned, I'm in the third pair. Hey, don't worry about it, said Mina, who then whispered to Ochako, after all, no one said we can't make a move on Midori during school hours tomorrow. Ochako blushed furiously in response and whispered back, haven't you heard from Momo-chan that it's a bad idea? Never mind the fact that we're not supposed to have Deku for ourselves until the day after tomorrow. What if we get caught and get expelled? Don't worry. I have a couple of ideas on how to avoid getting caught, said Mina, who gave Ochako a thumbs up. Ochako looked unconvinced as she spoke. It's not going to involve asking for a favor from Nezu-sensei or any of the other teachers who know about the 𝗔𝗵𝗲, is it? Mina suddenly froze and then looked away from Ochako as she nervously replied, don't be silly. I'm not going to stoop that low. Mina's nervous laugh only made Ochako more certain that Mina was indeed planning to do just that. Ochako mentally asked 𝗬𝗵𝗲, 𝗬𝗵𝗲-chan, you're not giving Mina-chan any ideas, are you? What makes you think that? Asked 𝗬𝗵𝗲, who actually sounded nervous. Ochako's pouting expression intensified as she mentally spoke, you are, aren't you? Well, to be perfectly fair, we spent quite a bit of time discussing about steamy romance, admitted 𝗬𝗵𝗲, who sounded sheepish. Ochako sighed and said aloud, you're hopeless, you know that. Sorry, my bad, said Mina, who was pressing her hands in prayer while bowing apologetically to Ochako. Kyuka, who easily overheard Ochako's conversation with Mina, smiled and said to Toru, "Something tells me that something crazy will happen to Midori during school hours sooner or later." Toru giggled in agreement and then asked, "So, do you want to come to my room to discuss a few things?" As Toru was invisible, it was impossible for Kyuka to know what kind of expression she was wearing, but her choice of words made it clear that she was not against getting NTMT with her. Kyuka blushed and replied, "Well, I guess it wouldn't hurt to talk about stuff at least." She then mentally thought to herself, "God damn it, I'm turning into a pervert, aren't I?" 𝗬𝗵𝗲 had a cheekily smug grin on her mental image as she spoke to Kyuka. "You speak of it like it's a bad thing in this case." Kyuka chose not to respond to 𝗬𝗵𝗲 as she and Toru excused themselves from the common room and made their way to Toru's room. Ochako and Mina soon excused themselves as well as they both went to Mina's room to further discuss on a few things. After the four girls left, Izuku sighed and said, "What are the chances that I'll be having 𝐬𝐴 in school during school hours? Knowing Mina-chan and Toru-chan, I'd be surprised if they do not get the jump on you by the end of this week, Karo," said Tsuyu. "I'm afraid that I have to agree with Azui-san. I might need to have a word with Nedzu-sensei about this possible issue," said Momo. Suddenly, Izuku and the girls in his HRM received a message from Nedzu which stated, "Do not worry, I have already anticipated the problem when I came up with the HRM plan. There are a number of places where you can relieve yourselves without getting disturbed as they can be locked from the inside and are soundproofed. However, do take note that your studies to become pro-heroes should still be your top priority while in school, so any late arrivals, absences or poor school performances will still be punishable like before. Getting caught in public is also punishable, so do be discreet about it." Izuku, Momo, Tsuyu and even Mei blushed after reading the message. The boy then sighed as his shoulders slumped and groaned, "I'm so doomed. I stand corrected. I'll be surprised if they do not get the jump on you by tomorrow, Karo," said Tsuyu. Mei grinned at Izuku and said, "You know, most boys would kill to be in your shoes right now." "I know," replied Izuku as he easily imagined Minoru, Denki and Hanta who were armed with various murder weapons. "Honestly, I'm extremely glad that Izuku is the one forming a 𝐻𝐴. Can you imagine how bad it would have been if someone like Mineta was the one forming the 𝐻𝐴?" asked Momo. Both Tsuyu and Momo shuddered in disgust at the mere idea of Minoru forming a 𝐻𝐴. "So, you girls want to start the hot and CC with Izuku now or later?" asked Mei. "Later, we do need to finish our assignments after all," said Momo, who then seductively added, "and, sometimes, good things do come to those who wait." Izuku blushed while Mei and Tsuyu nodded in agreement with Momo with suggestive smiles of their own. Later that night, Izuku, Tsuyu, Mei and Momo had just finished their assignments after having dinner and were soon ready to have SEC in the common bedroom. Mei, who was still a virgin and already had an IUD in her WMB, was eager to start and was soon completely naked. Izuku blushed at her naked body, which was more toned than expected due to carrying, making and fixing support equipment by herself. As for Mei, she was impressed by Izuku's body, which looked even better than she expected, and was soon touching his irked member with her hand as she spoke. "So this must be the big boy which made everyone feel good last night." Izuku, who was seated on a futon, felt pleasure as Mei started to tease his PP with the practiced precision and strength of someone who knew how to handle various tools by hand. He also noted that Mei looked CC while she was on her hands and knees with her shapely backside sticking upward. He gasped when Mei started licking and suckling onto the glands of his phallus before she tried to fit the thing into her mouth. Due to its size, she could not fit the whole thing into her mouth, but she did not mind it as one look at Izuku's expression was enough for her to know that he was enjoying the feeling. "𝗧𝗵𝗲-san, where did you learn how to do this?" asked Izuku. Mei stopped sucking onto Izuku's PP and explained, "I was hot and bothered since yesterday, so I asked a certain someone for a few tips before we got started." Realizing that 𝗬𝗵𝗲 had been giving Mei some tips on SE, Izuku had to ask, "Did she also tell you to build that robot?" "Nah, that was my idea, although she was eager to see it in action," said Mei, who then leaned back to reveal her moist maidenhood and asked, "So, you want to please me with your mouth and tongue, or do you want to go ahead and stick that thing in?" Izuku gulped before he decided to touch Mei's body with his hands. Mei shivered in pleasure as he touched, stroked, rubbed and fondled her body with his hands. She especially loved the way Izuku stroked along her muscles and teased her nipples and 𝐬𝐻. Before long, the longing for release was too much for Izuku to bear, and he placed his painfully irked phallus before her maidenhood. Knowing what Izuku wanted to do, Mei said, "Be gentle with me, okay? It's my first time after all." "I know," said Izuku before he plunged his 𝗏𝗏 into Mei's vagina. Mei grunted in pain as Izuku's pee-pee entered her fully, and it took a while for the pain to subside. Once the pain had subsided a bit, Mei said, "You can move now. Show me what you have got." Although Mei knew that Izuku was good in 𝐻𝐸, she did not expect him to be able to make her feel intense pleasure, as he not only moved his hips with experienced skill but also teased her nipples with his mouth and tongue. She instinctively held onto Izuku's head in her arms and wrapped her legs around his waist as she tried to match the movements of his hips with her own. As her pleasure washed away her discomfort, she realized, no wonder people are so obsessed with section. Due to her passionate longing to create awesome support equipment which would earn her a lot of money and fame, she had never paid much attention to the opposite SEC or SEC in general until recently. While Izuku was having 𝐻𝐸 with Mei, Momo and T kept themselves busy. Tsuyu, as usual, inserted her tongue into Momo's vagina and fondled her melons, while Momo made a green-colored replica of Izuku's pee-pee and shoved it deep into Tsuyu's moist maidenhood with one hand while her other hand fondled her backside. Both Izuku and Mei soon climaxed, and Mei nearly passed out from the intense pleas of 𝗏𝗏. He then kissed her and she happily accepted the kiss as the thought to herself, "I can definitely get used to this." Izuku soon recovered and pulled himself out of Mei before he carried her bridal style to a futon for her to sleep on and put a blanket over her. Once he was done, he turned around and saw both Momo and Tsuyu waiting for him expectantly. He then asked, "So which one of you want to go first?" Tsuyu raised her hand and said, "Momo-chan can start first." She then showed Izuku the DLD replica of his pee-pee and said, "She made something that will keep me occupied for a while, Karo." Izuku blushed at the sight of the DLD replica and said, "Okay, Momo's turn it is then." Momo giggled at Izuku's reaction and said, "In my defense, I needed something of sufficient prowess to stop Azui-san from overwhelming me. Her tongue is quite the potent appendage after all." Unable to argue against Momo's statement, Izuku approached her while trying to ignore Tsuyu, who was using her tongue to move the DLD in and out of her drenched private part, and knelt down to her eye level. He then bashfully said, "Momo-chan, you were the last one to have 𝐸𝐸 with me last night, and I want to make you feel good before we have section." Touched and excited by Izuku's words, Momo nodded with a smile and offered herself to him as she spoke, "Please, make me feel good, Izuku." Izuku needed no further encouragement as he reached out and kissed her. Realizing that she was having her first kiss with a boy, Momo happily accepted it and placed her hands onto Izuku's cheeks so that the kiss would be deeper. Soon, the loving kiss became lewd as their tongues wrestled with one another, and Izuku started to slide her shoulders before effing her melons and teasing her nipples. As for Momo, her hands wandered around to slide his muscular upper body and stomach before they started to slide his 𝗏𝗏. In response to the pleasure on his member, Izuku moved his hands so that they stroked her side and back before they fondled her buttocks. Eventually, they both had to stop to breathe, and the both looked into each other's eyes as Momo spoke, "Izuku, that was wonderful." She then lay onto her back and spread her legs open as she spoke, "Make use of me as you please." Needing no further encouragement, Izuku plunged his pee-pee into her eager vagina and moved his hips vigorously. Loving the sensation, Momo wrapped her arms and legs around Izuku and moved her own hips so that his phallus could go deeper into her. She then kissed Izuku's collarbone, causing Izuku to move even more furiously as a result. The two of them soon orgasmed together, and Izuku kissed Momo one more time before turning his attention to Tsuyu. Eager for SEC, Tsuyu immediately abandoned the DLD and leapt onto Izuku. Her eyes were hungry with longing as she spoke, "This time, I'm the one on top, Karo." She then slammed her hips onto Izuku, driving his still stiff 𝗏𝗏 into her. As Izuku gasped in response, Tsuyu kissed him passionately while shoving her tongue into his mouth. Their tongues twisted and wrestled as she moved her hips like a beast in heat. In spite of the furious rutting, Izuku was able to move his hands and quickly grab onto her backside, causing the frog girl to croak in surprise. She then 𝗵𝗵 in pleasure as he started to knead and fondle her backside with his strong yet gentle hands. Suddenly, Izuku received a suggestion from 𝗬𝗵𝗲, who was enjoying the sensations that they were feeling. Spank her butt, trust me. Although surprised by 𝗬𝗵𝗲's suggestion, Izuku decided to trust her and gave Tsuyu a firm smack on the right side of her buttocks. Although he was not hitting hard, and certainly not out of malice, Tsuyu's croaked in shock and her backside became incredibly tight in response, which caused her vaginal walls to tighten as well. Izuku almost climaxed due to the sudden tightness when Tsuyu looked at Izuku with wide eyes and asked, "Did you just spank me, Karo?" "Well, a certain someone suggested it," replied Izuku. Tsuyu's blush deepened as she realized who gave the idea to Izuku and said, "Of course she would know about that." "So you liked having your butt spanked?" asked Izuku. "Well, I do enjoy having my butt fondled, and I was getting curious about the feeling of getting spanked," admitted Tsuyu, who then said, "That said, I never expected it to feel so good." "You want me to spank you again then?" asked Izuku. Tsuyu's meek nod was all he needed to know before he smacked the left side of her backside. Tsuyu croaked again, although it sounded more like a throaty as she started to move her hips again. Encouraged by her response, Izuku started to alternate between fndlng her backside and smacking them, causing Tsuyu to and croak shamelessly as she loved the sensations she was feeling. Eventually, the two lovers kissed as they reached their 𝐒𝐽𝐽𝐼𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐵 causing Tsuyu's sore bottom to shake in orgasmic pleasure. After they both calmed down, Izuku lifted Tsuyu off his member and placed her next to Mei, who was unable to sleep due to Tsuyu's moans and croaks. Mei grinned at Izuku and said, "So, you're good for another round?" Izuku blushed and said, "I think I am, but are you sure you want to go it again? I don't want you to get too sore to move tomorrow." "Who says anything about putting your pee-pee in me?" asked Mei, who then pressed her melons together and said with a grin, "Plus, I'm pretty confident my bub will make you feel good." "If we're talking about melons, I'm quite sure that mine will not lose to yours, 𝗧𝗵𝗲, said Momo, who was hugging herself to push her melons upward. Mei grinned at Momo and said, "Then let's combine our bub together and wring that naughty boy dry." Momo smiled and said, "I can agree to that." Izuku was both nervous and excited as his pee-pee became irked again at the idea of having Momo and Mei pressing their melons onto it together. Knowing that Izuku was eager for another round, both girls got him to lie down so that they could use their melons to pleasure him. They then pressed their melons together with Izuku's phallus between them, enveloping it with their warm, soft bosoms. Izuku's back arched a little as they both moved their melons, a clear indication that he was enjoying the feeling. Momo and Mei wore lewd smiles as they watched Izuku's pee-pee twitch in an almost helpless manner between their melons while leaking 𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓. Between the two buxom girls who started licking the glands of his 𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓, Izuku's member did not last very long before he ejaculated for the fourth time that night. His 𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓 shot upwards with impressive force, covering the melons and faces of the two girls. Although surprised, both Mei and Momo got curious about the warm 𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓 which covered their faces and melons and tasted them. Momo wore a thoughtful expression and said, "Izuku's 𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓 doesn't taste too bad actually. So do you two want another round or get some rest for tomorrow?" asked Izuku. Momo made a handkerchief with her quirk to wipe the strong-smelling 𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓 off her skin as she answered, "While the idea of having some more AC is certainly appealing, I think that it is best that we rest for tonight. We didn't get much sleep last night after all. I want to continue working on my latest baby, so I'll need to get some rest and finish making the requested support items as quickly as possible," said Mei to received a different handkerchief from Momo. Understanding their reasoning, Izuku decided to get some sleep as well. As Izuku, Momo, Mei, and even Tsuyu cuddled together, his member became hard again, but his SXL longing was satiated enough for him to ignore it for the moment. Besides, it was only a matter of time before he would be having SEC on school grounds with Mina and Toru on the loose, so he definitely needed to conserve his stamina. Meanwhile, everyone sure went all out tonight, swore Kyuka, who was currently in Toru's room. Although she was not directly below the common room, she could still hear most of what had happened thanks to one of her ear jacks. There was also the matter of Ochako and Mina fighting right above Toru's room. Kyuka was sweaty and breathing heavily as Toru was in the middle of eating her out. Not surprisingly, she did not have her pants or panties on. Toru, who was only wearing her top and had one of Kyuka's ear jacks deep in her private part, looked up and curiously said, "Is Dekuin's group stopping now?" "Yeah, Midori seems pretty certain that either us or Ochako and Mina will go after him tomorrow during school hours," said Kyuka. Toru giggled and replied, "Well, he's not wrong." Kyuka's blush deepened as she spoke. "Hate to break this to you, but I can't help you on that one. Momo needs my help to get the girls in Class 1B involved in the HRM plan." "Well, if that's the case, why don't I give a helping hand to you too?" asked Toru. Kyuka smiled and replied, "I'm sure Momo'll be happy to have you on board." Ilusuero Ochako, who was in Mina's room, was gasping for breath as she had just fought with the pink-skinned girl who was currently lying on top of her. Both girls were exhausted, naked, sweaty, and covered in Mina's weakest acid. Not long after they had received Nedza's message about the places where they could have SEC within school grounds during school hours, Mina wasted no time in suggesting to Ochako that they attack Izuku during lunch break. Ochako was against the idea, but Mina was determined to make her change her mind by 𝐵𝗃 her BRST and teasing her private part. Although caught off guard, Ochako's competitive side made her refuse to admit defeat, so she retaliated by kissing Mina and 𝐵𝗃 her backside. Things quickly escalated between the two girls, which led to their current state. "Dian, I never thought you could be so kawaii," said Mina. Ochako's blush deepened as she recalled using her gravity-negating quirk to make Mina weightless so that she could lift her up and bury her face between her thighs to lick her nether part. She also recalled how Mina, after climaxing due to Ochako's counterattack, suddenly pinned her down and started coating them both in mildly acidic lubricant. Although Mina could not use her hands as she had to prevent Ochako from making her weightless again, she could still rub her lubricated thigh against Ochako's groin. Ochako responded in kind, and the two of them soon started kissing and rubbing their irked nipples together. Inevitably, the two of them orgasmed and were on the verge of passing out. In spite of her initial reluctance, Ochako asked, "So about attacking Deku tomorrow, can we keep it short? I don't want us to be in trouble." Understanding Ochako's worry and all too happy to compromise, Mina grinned at her and said, "Sure thing, Ochako-chan." The following day, Itsuka and Yui were walking towards a secluded part of the school. Earlier that day, they received a message from Momo, who wanted to talk to them about matters of romance which were somehow related to the recent rumors of Izuku's HRM and impressive GNTOs. Although Itsuka was not one to blindly believe in rumors, the fact that Momo did not outright deny the rumor when she asked her about it was already a clear indication that it was actually true to some extent. There was also the fact that 𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧, a boy with messy gray hair, black eyes with jagged tan-colored eyelashes and sharp teeth, talked to Idru, who confirmed that Izuku did in fact have a HRM which included all the girls in Class 1A. Itsuka blushed at the mere idea of Momo and the girls in Class 1A being a part of a HRM and wanted to know the details. If nothing else, she would be able to determine if she should continue stopping Minomanito, a reasonably tall boy with slick blonde hair and periwinkle purple eyes that have white irises, from claiming that Class 1A is full of SXL degenerates. Itsuka sighed as she thought about the overly competitive wacko of Class 1B. "Thinking about what Monoma-san did this morning?" asked Yui. "Among other things," admitted Itsuka, who had to karate chop him on the head to stop his latest outburst. "That outburst aside, do you really think Izuku actually has a HM?" asked Yui. "Honestly, I wouldn't have believed it if both Momo and Tetsu hadn't confirmed the rumor to be true," replied Itsuka. "There's that," admitted Yui. The two girls soon arrived at the meeting place, which was an unused club room. Waiting for them were Momo and Kyuka, who were seated around a large foldable table. Momo smiled at Itsuka and Yui and said, "Greeting, Kendo-san, Kodai-san." "Hey there, Yaoyorozu," replied Itsuka, while Yui nodded in response instead. The two girls from Class 1B were soon seated after closing the door. Itsuka then asked, "So you wanted to talk about romance, right? As well as the rumors concerning Izuku?" "Yes," replied Momo. Both Itsuka and Yui raised their eyebrows at the way Momo was referring to Izuku as she had previously called him Midoriya-san. Their curiosity were piqued as a result as Itsuka leaned forward and asked Momo, "So it is true. He has a HRM of all the girls in Class 1A, including you, and an impressive member." "Both rumors are indeed true," admitted Momo, who blushed at the memory of having hee with Izuku. Itsuka and even the normally expressionless Yui blushed before the ginger-haired girl asked, "And how did it happen?" Neither Itsuka nor Yui realized that a certain naked invisible girl was ominously approaching them from behind with visible pink tendrils emerging from her ears as Momo explained. "Well, it's a bit of a long story which all began with Uraraka-san and Azui-san wanting to. Meanwhile Izuku, who had been dragged into an unused meeting room by Mina and Ochako, was currently having doggy-style sex with Mina. She was pressed against the wall as Izuku furiously moved his hips so that his erection could penetrate deep inside of her. Mina's eyes were rolled back and her tongue was sticking out as she thought, "God, I love this position." Ochako, who was both on lookout and stealing glances at Izuku and Mina, was rubbing her legs together impatiently for her turn. Thankfully, everyone agreed to make it a quickie, so Izuku was soon done with Mina, who fell onto her knees while his 𝐒𝐻𝐽 leaked out of her twitching vagina. Unable to wait any longer, Ochako actually tore her tights so that she could pull her panties aside and present her wet nether part to Izuku. "Please, I can't wait for much longer, Deku." Turned on by the sight, Izuku swallowed his saliva before he passionately pushed Ochako against the wall and kissed her while his irked pee-pee entered her vagina. Ochako happily accepted the kiss and wrapped her arms and legs around him as he pressed her back against the wall and made love to her back at a certain unused clubroom. Itsuka and Yui were both blushing furiously as they realized that they were not only brain-jacked by an ex-villainess who had read their memories but were also aware that Izuku was having AC with both Ochako and Mina. Although 𝗬𝗵𝗲 was able to do her actual job properly due to reluctantly ignoring the ongoing SXL NTRCs, she did cheekily tell them both about it. Itsuka placed her hands onto her cheeks to hide her growing blush as she spoke. To think that Nezu-sensei would actually allow such a thing to happen. To be perfectly fair, he does have a good reason for allowing this to happen, argued Momo. Itsuka sighed and said, "I know that, Yarozu-san. It's just, this is the kind of crazy SHT that a perverted dumbass will dream about while masturbating to pawn," said Yui, who was frowning slightly. Considering her usually expressionless face, the slight frown and blush were very clear indications of her current state of displeasure or agitation. "Yeah, I'm not going to even try correcting that statement," said Kyuka. "So will you help us get the rest of the girls in Class 1B? Asked Momo, who was glad to know that neither Itsuka nor Yui were spies or even sleeper agents. "Well, considering what had happened at summer camp, I suppose we should give you all a helping hand," said Itsuka, who then added, "However, we're not going to officially join the HRM until we get to know Midoriya-san better, understand? You might want to avoid knowing everything about Midori and a certain someone until you're sure that you'll not regret it. Trust me, their pasts are seriously messed up," said Kyuka. Itsuka raised an eyebrow and said, "I can understand that other person, but Midoriya-san. You'll need to speak to him to know a bit more about his past." "It's not our place to speak about it to anyone," said Toru, who was wearing her school uniform and sounded unusually somber. Surprised by Toru's unusual tone, Itsuka was about to ask when Yui said, "If we're going to get the remaining girls, we'll have to be careful. Their quirks are quite troublesome to deal with." Itsuka nodded and then explained to Momo, Jairu and Toru about the quirks of the 5 remaining girls in Class 1B. Start of explanation: Komori Kinoko, a short and thin girl with honey-brown hair that forms a mushroom-shaped bob and cat-like eyes with irises that resemble cross-sliced shiitake mushrooms, possesses a quirk which allows her to grow various mushrooms around her. Although the mushrooms only last for 2 to 3 hours, they can grow in places where they should not be growing, such as inside a person's lungs. Tsunatori Pony, an American girl with wavy blonde hair, large and round blue eyes, rounded calves with hooves in place of feet, a short horse-like tail and a round race with a short equine muzzle, has a pair of lyre-shaped pale tan horns on her head which she could send flying and control at will. She can currently control up to 4 horns at the same time and use them for various tasks including attacking enemies and even using them as a means of transport. 𝗏𝗧𝗧𝗔𝗂𝐻, a girl with large dusky green eyes which have long lower eyelashes, long and pointed teeth and dark moss green hair, has a quirk which allows her to split her body up to 50 individual parts which she can levitate and control at will. She can even regenerate destroyed body parts, although the process does consume her energy. 𝗔𝗂𝐁𝗵𝗲, a ghost-like girl with pale gray hair that obscures the left side of her face, dark bangs under her blue eyes and a small mouth with full lips, has the ability to manipulate objects around her. Although she can only move things up to one person's weight, she can easily lift something alive that is not as heavy as a single person. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 has vines on her head which she can freely grow and manipulate to attack and restrain others. She can also detach them at will if necessary. End of explanation. So to put it simply, we cannot afford to be careless with any of them, explained Izuku. In other words, you'll have to ask them if they want to consider joining the HRM one by one to avoid any complications, said Momo. Izuku nodded and said, that's basically it. Also, I may be the class representative, but there's only so much I can do without attracting suspicion. We may have the support of 𝗧𝗪-sensei, Aizawa-sensei, Shizenji-san and even All Might-sensei, but we could use further support from the teachers, said Momo. Kyuka had a look on dread on her face as she spoke. The thing is, the only one whom we can make sure is truly trustworthy is Midnight Sensei. All the girls shuddered as they could only imagine what kind of unholy hell 𝗵𝗎 would unleash upon them if she joined the 𝐎𝐻𝐸. Never mind the fact that she would happy join in the fun, regardless of her current age and status, she would probably single-handedly SCK Izuku dry as soon as she got her hands on him. Momo sighed and said, as much as I hate to admit it, she might be the only one who can and is willing to help us out once she learns about the 𝗏𝗙 plan. Also, 𝗧𝗪-sensei is basically allowing us to add her in the 𝗏𝗙 and her quirk could be of tremendous help in getting the girls of Class 1B as quickly as possible. Maybe so, but we need to discuss with Deku about this. Midnight Sensei is a pro-heroine who is twice our age and is infamously shameless after all, said 𝗬𝗪. You definitely should, said Yui, who then added, your boy toy's PP is on the line after all. Dekuin's not our boy toy, he's someone who's really dear to us, argued 𝗬𝗪. Izuku cleared her throat to get everyone's attention and said, well, break is almost over and Yui and I will have to return to class. We'll let you know if we need any help or have managed to get any of the girls in our class. Momo bowed and said, thank you, Kendo-san. We wouldn't be able to get the other girls in your class without your help. Izuku smiled at Momo and replied, just make sure that you spare us the details of what you girls do with Midoriya-san, okay? You sure you want to be ignorant of the details? I'm in your head and I can tell that you're at least a bit curious, asked 𝗬𝗪, who was mentally speaking to Izuku in a cheeky manner. Izuku wore a deadpan expression as she mentally replied, yes, I'm sure you perverted blob and I'm not going to join the 𝗏𝗙 until I'm sure Midoriya-san is worth the effort. If you say so, replied 𝗬𝗪, who seemed pretty confident about Izuku joining the 𝗏𝗙 eventually. Back in Class 1A break time was over and almost everyone in Class 1A were stealing glances at Izuku, Mina and Ochako, who seemed a bit sweaty and disheveled when they entered the classroom. Even their teacher, 𝗵𝗎, was stealing glances at the three of them with a knowing smirk on her face. Izuku just knew that she was going to teach his class a very XPLCT version of SEC education or hold a NDE art class at some point in the near future. The fact that 𝗵𝗎 had been acting flirtatiously towards him not only made her SXL interest towards him very clear but also made Minoru, Denki and Hanta extremely jealous of him. Izuku sighed as he had to consider if he should include 𝗵𝗎 in the 𝗏𝗙 after 𝗬𝗪 mentally told him about the idea. On one hand, he was allowed to do so and having another teacher on his side would certainly help. In addition, her quirk would be very helpful in knocking out the remaining girls from Class 1B for a quick mass brainjacking. On the other hand, he had to agree with the girls of Class 1A that 𝗵𝗎 could easily SCK him dry if given the chance. As appealing as the prospect may be to some, especially for the likes of Minoru, he did not want to be effectively disabled for the rest of the day to recover his lost stamina. He still wanted to train properly and be a pro hero as soon as possible after all. Oh, is that right? Shocked by the sudden question, Izuku turned around and saw Nomiuri, who was not only standing right next to him without his notice but was wearing a wide grin as she spoke. You were mumbling a bit just now and I couldn't help but overhear you mumbling about me sucking you dry and how it would affect your studies. Izuku's face was frozen as it could not decide between becoming as pale as a sheet or as red as an apple. Amused by his reaction, Nomiuri seductively stroked his jawline to his chin with her fingers and said, I'm flattered that you would think so highly of my adult prowess, but you're not necessarily lacking in that department either if the rumors about you and your 𝐒𝐻𝗄𝐵 are true. Izuku gulped nervously as he tried to reply, I'm not that great, really. Nonsense. Any boy who is able to satisfy a HRM of at least 6 girls in a single night has got to be a pretty good stud in bed, argued Nomiuri, who then added, also, I'm not against joining a HRM myself. In spite of himself, Izuku was sexually aroused and his 𝐒𝐻𝗄𝗏 was ready to burst out of his pants. Nomiuri was an attractive pro-heroine after all. At that moment, the jealousy which Minoru was feeling was so powerful that almost everyone in class could have sworn that it took the form of an oppressive dark aura which threatened to engulf the entire classroom. It should be noted that Nomiuri soon officially joined the 𝐒𝐻𝗄𝐵 and convincing her was ridiculously easy. Later that day 𝗫𝗠 was in his office and he blinked in surprise as he stared at Nomiuri hugging Izuku as though he was a teddy bear to dote on. Standing beside them were the girls of Class 1A and Mei, who looked worriedly at Izuku as he was blushing to the point that they could have sworn that his face was steaming. While I'm not surprised by the fact that Kayama-san has joined the 𝐒𝐻𝗄𝐵, I'm surprised by how affectionate she is towards you, Midoriya-san, said 𝗫𝗠. He knew that there was a high chance that Nomiuri would join the 𝐒𝐻𝗄𝗏 and he knew that Izuku and his 𝐒𝗄𝗏 might need her help whether it was because she was a teacher or they needed her abilities. That said, even he did not expect the level of affection Nomiuri would have for the boy. Well, after 𝗬𝗵𝗲-chan brain-jacked her, she demanded to know the full story and well this happened, explained Izuku, who tried his best to ignore Nomiuri's affectionate embrace as her soft melons pressed onto the back of his neck. How can I not be after getting to know him and 𝗬𝗵𝗲-chan? Asked Nomiuri, who was rubbing her chin onto his fluffy hair and then said, they're the kind of people whom I just want to cuddle while wrapped in a warm blanket and naked. Shoyuta and Tashinori, who were standing on either side of 𝗫𝗠, groaned at Nomiuri's innuendo and felt sorry for Izuku. They both knew about her infamous energy and there was no doubt that she would 𝐒𝐽𝐽 him dry before the day was over. Anyway, I'll be helping Izuku with the 𝐒𝗄𝗏 plan and hold some special team-building exercises after school hours, said Nomiuri while wiggling her eyebrows. Izuku, the girls of Class 1A, Mei, Shoyuta and Tashinori all blushed at the mention of her special team-building exercises. 𝗬𝗼𝗼's mental image had an almost diabolical appearance as she grinned and rubbed her hands together while mentally speaking to Nomiuri. Oh, this is going to be so much fun, Nomiuri-chan. Nomiuri licked her lips and mentally replied, and I can't wait to get started, 𝗬𝗼𝗼-chan. Izuku, the girls of Class 1A and even Mei paled as they had one common thought. Mistakes have been made. Class 1A dorms, save me. The boys from Class 1A, including even Katsuki, stared in dumbstruck shock as a wailing Izuku was being dragged into the girls' side of the dorm by none other than Nomiuri, who was laughing with apparently insane glee. The fact that they pair was soon followed by the girls of Class 1A and Mei, who were all obviously worried for the boy, did nothing to reduce the shock of their unexpected entrance. Hanta turned his attention to Denki and Minoru and asked, should we be jealous of him or feel bad for him? Honestly, I think a bit of both sounds like a good idea at the moment, said Denki. Shuto, who overheard Hanta and Denki, decided to speak to them. Considering the rumors about Midoriya-san which have been spreading lately, I'm almost surprised that this didn't happen sooner. This is Midnight Sensei we're talking about after all. Okay, good point, admitted Denki. Mineta fell onto his knees and screamed heavenwards as bloody tears streamed down his contorted face of jealous rage. What does that lucky son of a beach have that the rest of us don't?